Welcome to the Sleepy Historian. Tonight we are going to talk about the story of the ninjas. In the mist-shrouded mountains of ancient Japan, where bamboo groves rustled with secrets and morning fog clung to steep valleys like silk veils, there emerged a shadow that would dance through history for centuries to come. This is the story of the shinobi, the ninja. Those phantom warriors who moved like whispers between worlds of light and darkness, reality and legend. Long before the word ninja entered the common tongue, before Hollywood would paint them in black masks and superhuman abilities, there lived men and women who understood that true power often lay not in the gleaming sword held high, but in the unseen step, the unheard breath, the unnoticed presence. They were the shadows that shaped empires, the whispers that toppled kingdoms, the invisible hands that guided the fate of a nation. The earliest traces of what would become the ninja tradition emerge from the ancient Japanese concept of shinobi no jutsu, literally the art of stealth or the art of enduring. These arts were born not from any single moment of inspiration, but from the gradual recognition that in a land of constant warfare, those who could gather information, move unseen, and strike without warning held advantages that no amount of armor or battlefield courage could match. Picture, if you will, the Japan of the 6th and 7th centuries, a land still finding its identity, still absorbing the cultural influences flowing across the sea from China and Korea, like gentle streams merging into a great river. Buddhism was taking root alongside the indigenous Shinto beliefs, creating a spiritual landscape as layered and mysterious as the mountain paths where the first shinobi would learn their craft. The imperial court at Nara and later Kyoto glittered with ceremony and poetry, but beyond the capital's influence, local lords built their power through alliances as shifting as morning mist. It was in this world of political intrigue and regional conflicts that the need for intelligence gathering became paramount. The great military treatises of ancient China, particularly Sun Tzu's Art of War, had already taught that knowing one's enemy was the key to victory. But Japan's unique geography, its countless valleys separated by steep mountains, its thousands of islands scattered like jewels across the sea, created a landscape perfectly suited to the arts of concealment and infiltration. The mountainous regions of Iga province, in what is now Mie Prefecture, and nearby Kōga in Shiga Prefecture, would become legendary as the heartlands of ninja culture. These areas shared certain characteristics that made them ideal nurseries for the shinobi arts. They were remote enough to remain relatively independent from central authority, yet strategically positioned along important travel routes between the capital and the eastern provinces. Their rugged terrain provided countless hiding places, caves hidden behind waterfalls, mountain paths known only to locals, forests so dense that noon seemed like twilight beneath their canopy. But geography alone does not create legends. The people who came to inhabit these mountains brought with them a unique combination of practical skills and philosophical insights that would forge the foundation of ninja tradition. Many were refugees from political upheavals, survivors of failed rebellions, masterless samurai who had lost their lords, or simply independent-minded individuals who preferred the freedom of the mountains to the constraints of court life or village society. Among these mountain dwellers, practical skills became matters of survival. the ability to move silently through dense forest, to find one's way in complete darkness, to read weather patterns and track both animals and humans. These were not exotic martial arts, but daily necessities. Children grew up learning which plants could heal and which could harm, how to construct shelters that were invisible from just a few feet away, how to communicate across great distances using bird calls or smoke signals. The spiritual dimension of what would become ninjutsu was equally important. Buddhism, with its emphasis on impermanence and the illusory nature of the material world, provided philosophical underpinnings for arts based on deception and concealment. If all things were indeed transitory, then perhaps the solid appearance of reality itself could be manipulated. The Shinto tradition of kami, spirits dwelling in natural features like mountains, streams, and trees, encouraged a deep awareness of the natural world that would serve the shinobi well in their outdoor activities. From Chinese Taoism came concepts of wu wei, acting without forcing, and the importance of being like water, fluid, adaptable, finding the path of least resistance. These philosophical concepts would later be codified in ninja training as the importance of blending with one's environment rather than fighting against it, of achieving goals through misdirection rather than direct confrontation. The early practitioners of shinobi no jutsu were not yet the organized clans they would later become. They were more like networks of individuals and families who shared knowledge and techniques, bound together by mutual need and common purpose rather than formal structures. A mountain guide who knew every hidden trail might share information with a village herbalist who understood poisons, who in turn might collaborate with a refugee samurai who had learned battlefield tactics. These early shinobi found employment with various local lords who recognized the value of their unique skills. While the aristocratic samurai class fought according to codes of honor that emphasized open battle and glorious death, practical-minded daimyo understood that wars were won not just by courage, but by information, surprise, and the ability to strike at unexpected moments and places. The distinction between samurai and shinobi was not initially as sharp as it would later become. Many samurai practiced elements of stealth and reconnaissance as part of their military training, and many early ninja came from samurai backgrounds. What began to differentiate the shinobi was their willingness to specialize in these shadow arts, to develop them into a comprehensive system that valued effectiveness over honor, results over reputation. As centuries passed and Japan's political landscape became increasingly complex, the demand for shinobi skills grew correspondingly. The rise of the warrior class during the Kamakura period, 1185 to 1333, created a society where military intelligence could mean the difference between survival and extinction for entire clans. Local conflicts multiplied as the central government's power waned, and each daimyo needed eyes and ears in enemy territories. The geographic isolation that had initially sheltered the mountain communities of Iga and Kōga began to work in their favor in a different way. As masters of their harsh terrain, they could offer services that no other region could match. They became known throughout Japan as sources of reliable intelligence, skilled infiltrators, and specialists in what we might call unconventional warfare. During this formative period, the basic principles that would guide ninja practice for centuries were taking shape. Invisibility was not about magical powers, but about understanding light and shadow, sound and silence, movement and stillness. A shinobi learned to dress like a farmer when approaching a farming village, like a merchant when entering a market town, like a monk when infiltrating a temple. They studied not just fighting techniques, but social customs, regional dialects, seasonal festivals, and local superstitions, anything that would help them blend seamlessly into unfamiliar environments. The ninja's relationship with technology was also established during these early centuries. While samurai might disdain certain weapons or tactics as dishonorable, shinobi embraced any tool that served their purpose. They became early adopters of gunpowder, brought to Japan by Portuguese traders in the 16th century, and they developed specialized climbing equipment, underwater breathing devices, and various forms of smoke and flash powders centuries before such things appeared elsewhere. Perhaps most importantly, the early shinobi developed a philosophy of adaptability that would serve them well through centuries of changing political conditions. Unlike the rigid social hierarchies that governed samurai life, ninja organizations remained fluid, promoting individuals based on skill and results rather than birth or formal credentials. This meritocratic approach attracted talented individuals from all social classes, creating diverse communities where a farmer's son might learn alongside a displaced aristocrat, where women could train as equals alongside men. The mountain villages of Iga and Kōga during these formative centuries must have been remarkable places, outwardly appearing no different from any other rural communities, with their terraced rice fields and thatched roof farmhouses, their shrines dedicated to local kami, and their markets where neighbors gathered to exchange goods and gossip. But beneath this pastoral surface lay networks of intelligence and training that connected these seemingly isolated mountain settlements to events across the entire Japanese archipelago. Children in these communities grew up learning skills that other Japanese children never encountered. They played games that developed their abilities to move silently, to memorize complex information, to remain motionless for long periods. What seemed like innocent childhood activities were actually sophisticated training programs designed to create adults capable of operating in the shadows of Japanese society. Young women learned herbalism and medicine, but also the properties of various poisons and their antidotes. They studied the arts of entertainment and social grace that would allow them to move freely in aristocratic circles, gathering information through seemingly casual conversation. Young men developed physical skills like climbing, swimming, and endurance running, but also learned trades like carpentry, metalworking, and pottery that would provide cover identities for intelligence missions. The oral tradition that preserved and transmitted ninja knowledge during these early centuries was remarkably sophisticated. Without written records that might be discovered and compromise their operations, the shinobi developed methods of encoding information in songs, stories, and seemingly innocent conversations. Complex technical knowledge about lockpicking, trap building, and poison preparation was preserved in verse forms that sounded like children's nursery rhymes or folk tales about legendary heroes. As the 15th century approached, bringing with it the period of chaos and opportunity known as the Sengoku era, these mountain communities had developed from scattered groups of independent operators into organized networks capable of conducting large-scale intelligence operations. The stage was set for the golden age of the ninja, when their skills would be tested against the greatest military minds in Japanese history, when their actions would help determine which daimyo would rise to rule a unified nation. But that is a story for another chapter. For now, let us rest with the image of those misty mountains where it all began, where patient men and women learned to read the language of shadows and wind, where children played games that prepared them to shape the destiny of an empire. In the stillness of those ancient valleys, where bamboo still rustles with secrets and morning fog still clings like silk veils, the whispers of the first shinobi echo through time, reminding us that true power often moves unseen, unheard, but never unfelt. In the heart of central Japan, where ancient mountain ranges create natural fortresses and hidden valleys shelter secrets older than written history, two names rose above all others in the chronicles of the Shadow Warriors, Iga and Kōga. These were more than mere geographical designations. They were the legendary strongholds where the art of ninjutsu reached its highest flowering, where generations of families devoted their lives to perfecting the ways of stealth, intelligence, and invisible warfare. The province of Iga, nestled in the mountainous interior of what is now Mie Prefecture, was a land that seemed designed by nature herself to nurture the shadow arts. Steep ridges covered in dense forest surrounded valleys so narrow that sunlight penetrated only at midday, creating a landscape of perpetual twilight that taught its inhabitants to move comfortably in conditions where others would be blind and helpless. Rivers ran swift and cold through rocky gorges, their constant murmur masking the sound of footsteps and whispered conversations. Caves hidden behind waterfalls provided natural meeting places and storage for equipment, while the complex network of mountain trails, known only to locals, created a transportation system invisible to outsiders. The neighboring region of Kōga, in the southern part of present-day Shiga Prefecture, shared many of these geographical advantages while adding its own unique characteristics. Lake Biwa, Japan's largest freshwater lake, dominated the northern horizon, its vast waters providing training grounds for aquatic infiltration techniques and escape routes that could spirit a shinobi away from pursuers in mere minutes. The Suzuka Mountains formed a natural barrier between Kōga and the outside world, their peaks shrouded in mists that seemed to swallow travelers whole, only to release them in distant valleys with no memory of the paths they had taken. Both regions benefited from their strategic position along the Tokaido, the great highway connecting the imperial capital of Kyoto with the eastern provinces. This placement allowed the ninja clans to monitor the movement of armies, merchants, and messengers while remaining safely hidden in their mountain fastnesses. Travelers passing through these areas often reported an uneasy feeling of being watched, though they could never quite identify the source of their discomfort. They were right to feel observed. From hidden vantage points carved into cliffsides and concealed behind carefully cultivated vegetation, the eyes of the shinobi missed nothing. The social structure that evolved in these regions was unlike anything else in feudal Japan. While the rest of the country operated under the rigid hierarchy of the samurai class system, with clear distinctions between warriors, farmers, artisans, and merchants, the ninja communities developed their own unique form of organization based on proven ability rather than inherited status. Families that had demonstrated expertise in particular aspects of the shadow arts formed the nuclei of larger clans, but membership was fluid, and talented individuals could rise through the ranks regardless of their origins. In Iga, 3 great families dominated the ninja networks: the Hattori, the Momochi, and the Fujibayashi. Each brought distinct specialties and perspectives to the collective knowledge of the region. The Hattori clan, perhaps the most famous of all ninja families, developed particular expertise in espionage and intelligence analysis. Their ability to place agents in enemy castles and courts, to piece together fragmentary information into coherent strategic pictures, and to maintain communication networks across vast distances became legendary throughout Japan. The family's rise to prominence began in the 14th century when Hattori Yasunaga distinguished himself in service to various local daimyo. Unlike many samurai of his era, Yasunaga recognized that future conflicts would be won not just by superior swordsmanship or cavalry charges, but by superior information and the ability to strike at unexpected times and places. He began systematically recruiting individuals with useful skills: former soldiers who understood fortification, merchants who traveled widely and could observe troop movements, artisans who could create specialized equipment, women who could move freely in social circles closed to men. The Momochi clan specialized in what might be called psychological warfare, developing techniques for spreading disinformation, creating false identities, and manipulating enemy decision-making through carefully planted rumors and staged incidents. They understood that the human mind could be as vulnerable as any castle wall, and they became masters of exploiting fear, suspicion, and uncertainty to achieve strategic objectives without ever drawing a sword. Master Momochi Sandayu, who led the clan during the turbulent 16th century, was said to maintain simultaneously 3 different identities in 3 separate provinces, each so convincing that even his closest associates were unaware of his other lives. He would spend months at a time as a wealthy merchant in one region while secretly managing ninja operations throughout central Japan, then disappear suddenly only to resurface as a respected priest in a distant temple, gathering intelligence on the political leanings of various daimyo through seemingly casual religious discussions. The Fujibayashi family developed the technological and tactical innovations that kept Iga's ninja forces ahead of their rivals. They created new forms of climbing equipment that allowed infiltrators to scale castle walls thought to be impregnable, developed water-breathing devices that enabled underwater approaches to island fortresses, and perfected various explosive and incendiary compounds that could create diversions or eliminate specific targets with surgical precision. In neighboring Kōga, the ninja community organized itself around 53 distinct families, each contributing specialized knowledge to the collective capabilities of the region. This more decentralized structure made Kōga's networks more resilient than Iga's concentrated clan system, as the destruction or compromise of any single family would leave the others intact and operational. The Kōga families included specialists in mountaineering, underwater operations, animal training, chemical warfare, astronomical observation, and dozens of other disciplines that modern observers might find surprisingly sophisticated for medieval Japan. The rivalry between Iga and Kōga ninja was both competition and collaboration, driving innovation while maintaining mutual respect for shared traditions. Occasionally, the two regions would find themselves on opposite sides of a conflict, leading to elaborate games of move and counter-move as ninja faced ninja in contests of stealth and cunning. These confrontations, while rare, produced some of the most sophisticated intelligence operations in pre-modern history, with each side attempting to penetrate the other's networks while protecting their own secrets. More often, however, Iga and Kōga worked in parallel, each developing complementary capabilities that enhanced the overall effectiveness of ninja operations throughout Japan. Iga's strength in long-term intelligence gathering and analysis paired well with Kōga's tactical flexibility and technological innovation. When major operations required resources beyond what either region could provide alone, the two networks would coordinate their efforts with a precision that amazed contemporary observers. The daily life in these ninja strongholds bore little resemblance to the romantic images later popularized in literature and film. The communities appeared outwardly indistinguishable from any other rural areas of medieval Japan, with their terraced rice fields, vegetable gardens, and small workshops producing textiles, pottery, and metal goods for local use and trade. Visitors would see farmers tending their crops, craftsmen at their benches, children playing in village squares, and monks pursuing their religious duties at local temples and shrines. What visitors could not see was the secondary layer of activity that gave these communities their true purpose. The farmer checking his rice fields at dawn was also noting the movements of birds that might indicate the approach of strangers. The craftsman hammering at his forge was producing not just farming tools, but specialized equipment for nighttime operations. The children's games were actually training exercises designed to develop the sensory awareness, physical coordination, and mental discipline required for advanced ninja techniques. The integration of ninja training with ordinary life was so complete that practitioners could maintain their skills while appearing to lead completely normal existences. A village carpenter might specialize in techniques for bypassing various types of locks and barriers, applying his knowledge of wood and metal construction to the problems of silent entry and exit. A local merchant could maintain detailed knowledge of road conditions, weather patterns, and political developments throughout a wide region while appearing to pursue nothing more than profitable trade. Women played crucial roles in these communities, often serving as the primary intelligence collectors due to their ability to move freely in social situations where men might be viewed with suspicion. Kunoichi, as female ninja were known, developed their own specialized techniques and equipment. They might pose as entertainers, servants, or pilgrims to gain access to enemy strongholds, using their presumed harmlessness to gather information or position themselves for sabotage operations. Many kunoichi became masters of chemical warfare, developing undetectable poisons and antidotes, creating smoke screens and flash powders, and even perfecting cosmetics that could dramatically alter their appearance. The training grounds hidden throughout Iga and Kōga were marvels of engineering and imagination, designed to replicate every type of challenge a ninja might encounter in the field. Mock castle walls allowed practitioners to perfect their climbing techniques, while replica buildings with various types of locks, traps, and security measures provided opportunities to practice infiltration skills. Underwater training areas simulated the conditions around island fortresses or river crossings, while dense forest courses tested abilities in silent movement and navigation. Weather training was considered particularly important, as ninja operations often depended on taking advantage of natural conditions that would hinder enemy observation and movement. Students learned to move effectively in rain, snow, and fog, to use wind patterns to mask sound, and to read atmospheric signs that might indicate changing conditions. Night training began in childhood, with exercises designed to develop enhanced hearing, touch sensitivity, and spatial awareness that would allow effective operation in complete darkness. The philosophical foundations of ninja education emphasized adaptability above all else. While samurai training focused on developing excellence within established forms and traditions, ninja instruction taught students to improvise, to think creatively about problems, and to find solutions that others might consider impossible or dishonorable. This flexibility of mind was considered as important as physical skills, since ninja often found themselves in situations where standard techniques or equipment would be inadequate. Record-keeping in these communities was necessarily discreet, with important information encoded in seemingly innocent documents or preserved through oral traditions that could be passed down without creating written evidence that might compromise operations. Family scrolls that appeared to contain genealogical information or agricultural records actually held detailed technical manuals covering everything from lockpicking to poison preparation. Folk songs and children's games preserved complex tactical knowledge in forms that would seem harmless to outsiders. The seasonal rhythms of life in Iga and Kōga followed patterns shaped by both agricultural necessity and operational requirements. Spring planting season provided cover for establishing new intelligence networks as merchants and workers traveled to distant regions. Summer festivals created opportunities for agents to meet and exchange information while appearing to participate in religious or social celebrations. Autumn harvests coincided with the campaign season for many daimyo, requiring intensive intelligence gathering and tactical support. Winter's longer nights and harsh weather provided ideal conditions for training in extreme environments, while keeping enemy forces largely inactive. As the 16th century progressed and Japan entered the chaotic Sengoku period, these hidden strongholds would face their greatest challenges and achieve their most spectacular successes. The skills developed in the mountain villages of Iga and Kōga would be tested against the finest military minds of the age, and the legends born from these confrontations would echo through Japanese culture for centuries to come. But even in their eventual decline, the legacy of these remarkable communities would endure, a testament to the power of human ingenuity, dedication, and the deep understanding that true strength often lies not in what others can see, but in what remains forever hidden in shadow. In the pre-dawn darkness of the mountain valleys, when mist clung to the hillsides like ancestral spirits, and even the forest creatures maintained respectful silence, the true education of a shinobi began. This was not the education of books and formal instruction found in the temples and courts of Japan, but something far more intimate and demanding, a complete transformation of human potential that touched every aspect of body, mind, and spirit. The path to becoming a true ninja began almost from birth, not through harsh discipline imposed from without, but through a gradual immersion in a way of life where extraordinary abilities emerged as naturally as breathing. Children born into the ninja communities of Iga and Kōga grew up in environments where what others might consider supernatural skills were simply part of daily existence, woven so seamlessly into ordinary activities that they became second nature. A child's first lessons came through play that was anything but innocent. Games of hide-and-seek in these communities involved challenges that would have tested adult soldiers elsewhere, remaining motionless and silent for hours at a time, moving through dense undergrowth without disturbing a single leaf, communicating across distances using subtle gestures or bird calls that carried complex meanings. What appeared to visiting adults as children enjoying themselves was actually the beginning of a comprehensive training program that would continue for decades. The physical conditioning that formed the foundation of ninja training bore little resemblance to the formal martial arts practiced by samurai. Rather than developing strength through repetitive exercises or perfecting specific combat techniques, young shinobi learned to use their bodies as infinitely adaptable tools, capable of meeting any challenge that circumstances might present. They developed the ability to run silently across any terrain, to climb surfaces that appeared completely smooth, to swim underwater for distances that seemed impossible, and to endure extremes of heat, cold, hunger, and exhaustion without losing their mental clarity or physical effectiveness. Tree climbing became an art form in itself, with students learning to ascend not just obvious structures like pines with sturdy branches, but the smooth trunks of bamboo, the delicate limbs of cherry trees, even the vertical faces of rocky cliffs, where only the tiniest irregularities provided handholds. They practiced until they could climb in complete darkness, in driving rain, while carrying equipment and while maintaining absolute silence. The goal was never simply to reach the top, but to do so in a way that left no trace of their passage. Swimming training extended far beyond what ordinary people would consider adequate aquatic skills. Ninja students learned to remain underwater for extraordinary lengths of time, to swim silently beneath the surface, to navigate by touch in murky water, and to approach targets from beneath without creating any disturbance that might alert defenders above. They developed techniques for using hollow reeds as breathing devices, for constructing waterproof containers that could protect equipment during aquatic approaches, and for reading water currents and weather patterns that would affect underwater operations. The development of enhanced sensory awareness formed another crucial element of ninja training. Students learned to identify individuals by the sound of their footsteps, to detect the presence of hidden observers through subtle changes in forest sounds or the behavior of animals, to navigate in complete darkness using only touch and spatial memory. They practiced until they could distinguish between dozens of different plant species by scent alone, identify the contents of sealed containers by sound when shaken, and determine the number of people in a building by listening to breathing patterns and floor creaks. Night vision training began early and continued throughout a ninja's career, with students spending progressively longer periods in complete darkness until they could function almost as effectively without light as with it. They learned to recognize shapes by the faintest starlight, to detect movement by noting changes in shadow patterns, and to use their enhanced hearing and spatial awareness to create mental maps of unfamiliar environments. These skills required years to develop fully, but once mastered, they gave ninja operatives enormous advantages during nighttime operations. Mental training was considered equally important as physical conditioning, with emphasis placed on developing the psychological qualities that distinguished elite ninja from ordinary practitioners. Students learned to maintain absolute calm under extreme pressure, to think clearly while in mortal danger, to endure physical pain without betraying their emotions, and to resist interrogation techniques that might compromise their missions or their comrades. Memory training reached levels of sophistication that would impress modern experts in cognitive psychology. Ninja students developed the ability to memorize complex floor plans after brief observation, to recall detailed conversations word for word weeks after hearing them, and to maintain multiple false identities, complete with detailed personal histories, relationships, and character quirks. They learned mnemonic techniques that allowed them to encode sensitive information in seemingly innocent objects or activities, making it possible to carry intelligence through enemy territory without creating any evidence that might expose them if captured. The study of human psychology formed a crucial component of advanced ninja training, with students learning to read personality types, predict behavior patterns, and manipulate emotions and decision-making processes. They developed the ability to project whatever personality would be most effective in a given situation, to inspire trust or fear as circumstances required, and to blend so completely into social environments that they became virtually invisible despite being in plain sight. Disguise techniques went far beyond simply changing clothes or altering physical appearance. True mastery involved complete character transformation, with ninja learning to adopt the posture, speech patterns, cultural mannerisms, and psychological attitudes of whatever role they needed to play. A master of disguise could transform from a humble farmer into an aristocratic merchant, from a devout monk into a worldly entertainer, from a frail elderly person into a vigorous young worker, all with changes so subtle and complete that even close associates might not recognize the transformation. The technical skills that ninja developed were remarkable, both for their sophistication and their variety. Students learned architecture and engineering principles that allowed them to identify structural weaknesses in buildings, to predict how various materials would respond to different stresses, and to create improvised tools and equipment from whatever materials were available. They studied metallurgy and chemistry to understand weapons and explosives, medicine and herbalism to treat injuries and create various compounds, and astronomy and navigation to find their way across unfamiliar territory. Lockpicking became a refined art, with ninja developing specialized tools and techniques for defeating every type of security device used in medieval Japan. They learned to identify different types of locks by sound and touch, to construct picks and keys from available materials, and to open complex mechanisms silently and quickly. Beyond mechanical locks, they studied the psychological and social barriers that protected sensitive information, learning to bypass human security measures through misdirection, impersonation, and social engineering. The creation and use of specialized equipment represented another area where ninja training excelled in practical innovation. Students learned to construct climbing gear from silk rope and metal hooks that could be concealed easily and deployed quickly to create smoke bombs and flash powders that would provide concealment or distraction, to prepare various types of poisons and antidotes, and to modify ordinary tools and weapons for specialized purposes. Weapons training for ninja differed significantly from the formal martial arts practiced by samurai. While samurai focused on achieving perfection with traditional weapons like katana and naginata, ninja learned to use anything and everything as potential weapons. Farming tools, kitchen implements, carpentry equipment, even everyday items like chopsticks or hair ornaments could become deadly in the hands of a skilled practitioner. They developed techniques for fighting in confined spaces, for combat while maintaining disguise, and for eliminating targets silently without leaving evidence of violence. The shuriken, or throwing stars, that became iconic symbols of ninja weaponry were actually among the least important tools in their arsenal. More significant were items like the kusarigama, a sickle attached to a weighted chain that could be used for climbing, grappling, or combat, and the tanto, short blades that were easier to conceal than longer swords and more effective for close-quarters work. Many ninja weapons were designed to serve multiple purposes, with climbing tools doubling as weapons and everyday items concealing lethal capabilities. Explosive and incendiary devices represented some of the most advanced technology available in medieval Japan, with ninja serving as early adopters and innovators in the use of gunpowder and chemical compounds. They learned to create charges that could breach walls or destroy specific structures, to prepare incendiary mixtures that would create fires or smoke screens, and to construct timing devices that would delay explosions until predetermined moments. Communication techniques developed by ninja communities were remarkably sophisticated, allowing for the transmission of complex information across great distances without detection. They used systems of coded signals involving the placement of ordinary objects, the selection of specific words in seemingly normal conversations, and even the timing of routine activities to convey intelligence to distant operatives. Dead drops and message caches were established throughout their operational areas, allowing agents to exchange information without direct contact that might compromise their identities. The philosophical underpinnings of ninja training drew from multiple sources, creating a worldview that supported the demanding lifestyle and moral ambiguities inherent in intelligence work. From Buddhism came concepts of impermanence and the illusory nature of reality that made deception and concealment seem natural rather than dishonest. From Taoism came emphasis on flexibility, adaptation, and finding the path of least resistance rather than confronting obstacles directly. From Shinto came deep respect for nature and the development of intuitive awareness that allowed ninja to blend seamlessly with their natural environment. Unlike the rigid code of Bushido that governed samurai behavior, ninja philosophy emphasized pragmatism and results over honor and reputation. This didn't mean that ninja lacked ethical standards, but rather that their moral framework was more complex and situational than the absolute principles that guided warrior aristocrats. A ninja might use deception, theft, or even assassination as tools to achieve larger objectives, but these actions were governed by careful consideration of consequences and alternatives rather than simple expedients. The concept of loyalty in ninja communities was similarly complex, focusing more on mutual obligation and shared purpose than on hierarchical obedience. While samurai swore absolute loyalty to specific lords, regardless of circumstances, ninja maintained networks of reciprocal relationships that could adapt to changing political conditions. This flexibility allowed ninja organizations to survive political upheavals that destroyed more rigid military structures, but it also required individual practitioners to develop sophisticated judgment about when and how to honor competing obligations. Training in these mountain strongholds continued throughout a ninja's lifetime, with even the most accomplished masters continuing to refine their skills and learn new techniques. The rapid changes in military technology and political organization that characterized medieval Japan required constant adaptation, and ninja communities that failed to evolve quickly found themselves obsolete. This emphasis on continuous learning and improvement helped maintain the effectiveness of ninja operations even as the broader society around them underwent dramatic transformations. The seasonal training cycles that governed ninja education reflected both practical necessities and philosophical principles. Spring brought focus on infiltration techniques as the campaign season approached and targets began to prepare their defenses. Summer emphasized endurance and survival skills as practitioners tested their abilities against the harshest natural conditions. Autumn concentrated on intelligence gathering and analysis as political situations reached critical points. Winter provided opportunities for the most advanced training as the harsh weather created extreme challenges and most potential enemies remained inactive. Advanced students would eventually specialize in particular aspects of ninja arts, developing expertise that would define their roles within the larger organization. Some became masters of intelligence analysis, capable of piecing together fragmentary information into comprehensive strategic assessments. Others specialized in technical operations, becoming expert in the construction and deployment of specialized equipment. Still others focused on human operations, developing the social and psychological skills needed to recruit sources, maintain cover identities, and manipulate enemy decision-making processes. The graduation from student to practicing ninja was not marked by formal ceremonies or public recognition, but by the gradual assumption of real operational responsibilities. Young practitioners would begin with simple tasks like courier duties or basic surveillance, gradually taking on more complex and dangerous assignments as their skills and judgment developed. The transition from training to operations was so gradual that many ninja could not identify any specific moment when they had completed their education and begun their careers. This seamless integration of training and operations reflected the fundamental philosophy underlying ninja education, that the development of extraordinary capabilities was not an end in itself, but a means to serve purposes larger than individual achievement. The mountains and valleys where these skills were developed would soon test their products against the greatest military challenges in Japanese history. And the shadows that had nurtured these remarkable abilities would send forth operatives capable of changing the course of nations. In the golden light of dawn, filtering through paper screens, a humble merchant checked his goods one final time before beginning his journey to the distant castle town. His rough hemp clothing bore the honest stains of travel and commerce. His manner displayed the respectful deference appropriate to his humble station, and his weathered hands showed the calluses of a lifetime spent handling merchandise. To any observer, he appeared exactly what he seemed, another of the countless traders who kept the arteries of medieval Japan flowing with goods and information. What no observer could detect was that beneath this perfect facade moved one of the most skilled operatives in the history of espionage, a master of transformation so complete that even his own mother might not have recognized him. For this was the highest art of the ninja, not the dramatic martial techniques that would later capture popular imagination, but the far more subtle and dangerous ability to become, in every meaningful sense, someone entirely different. The art of disguise as practiced by the ninja went far beyond the superficial changes in appearance that modern audiences might expect. True mastery required complete psychological transformation, the ability to think, feel, and react as the character being portrayed would in any situation. This was not acting in any conventional sense, but rather a form of temporary personality replacement so thorough that the practitioner could maintain their cover even under intense scrutiny or unexpected stress. The training for such abilities began in childhood, with exercises that most observers would have dismissed as simple play. Young students would spend hours observing people from different social classes, studying not just their obvious characteristics like clothing and speech patterns, but the subtle details that truly defined their identities. The way a farmer held his shoulders after years of bending over rice fields, the particular mixture of confidence and anxiety that marked a merchant approaching an important negotiation, the unconscious habits that revealed a person's origins, education, and life experiences. These observations were then translated into practice sessions, where students would attempt to replicate not just the appearance, but the entire persona of their subjects. They learned to adjust their breathing to match different emotional states, to modify their posture to reflect various occupations and social positions, to alter their walking gait to suggest different ages, injuries, or states of health. The physical techniques of transformation were remarkably sophisticated, involving methods that would not be out of place in modern theatrical training. Students learned to change their apparent height through subtle adjustments to posture and carriage, to alter their facial features using pressure points and muscle control, to modify their voice, not just in tone and accent, but in the underlying rhythm and breathing patterns that gave each person's speech its distinctive character. Makeup and prosthetics were used sparingly, partly because elaborate disguises would be difficult to maintain during long-term infiltrations, but mainly because the ninja philosophy emphasized internal transformation over external decoration. A master of disguise could become an elderly person through changes in movement and attitude that were far more convincing than any artificial wrinkles or grey hair. They could suggest illness or injury through subtle alterations in breathing and posture that would fool even medical practitioners. The study of regional variations occupied years of training, as Japan's isolated geography had created dozens of distinct local cultures, each with its own dialect, customs, and social patterns. A ninja operating in the sophisticated court culture of Kyoto needed to understand completely different behavioral norms than one infiltrating a rough frontier garrison or a remote fishing village. They learned not just the obvious differences in speech and dress, but the subtle variations in humor, social etiquette, religious observances, and personal relationships that marked each community as unique. Professional identities required particularly intensive study, as each occupation carried its own body of specialized knowledge, technical skills, and social connections that an imposter would need to master convincingly. A ninja posing as a carpenter needed to understand not just basic woodworking techniques, but the specific tools used in different regions, the traditional methods passed down through various craft guilds, the economic relationships between carpenters and other trades, and the social status and typical career patterns of the profession. The merchant identity was perhaps the most versatile and widely used, as traders had legitimate reasons to travel extensively, to ask questions about local conditions, and to interact with people from all social classes. Master Ninja developed detailed knowledge of trade routes, seasonal price variations, quality standards for different commodities, and the complex networks of credit and obligation that bound the merchant community together. They learned to evaluate goods with the expert eye of experienced traders, to negotiate with the proper mixture of shrewdness and courtesy, and to display the careful balance of confidence and anxiety that marked successful businessmen. Religious identities offered different advantages, as monks and priests could travel freely across political boundaries, had access to information shared in confidence, and were generally regarded with respect and trust. Ninja trained in Buddhist theology and practices could pose convincingly as wandering monks, while those schooled in Shinto traditions might serve as itinerant shrine keepers or religious functionaries. These disguises required not just knowledge of religious doctrine and ritual, but genuine spiritual insight that would allow them to provide meaningful counsel and maintain their credibility during extended interactions. Female operatives, the kunoichi, developed their own specialized repertoire of identities and techniques. They might pose as entertainers, gaining access to social gatherings where important conversations took place in an atmosphere of relaxed informality. Servant identities allowed them to work within target households for extended periods, observing daily routines and relationships while appearing to be part of the natural background. Merchant wives could travel with their husbands or independently, conducting business negotiations that provided cover for intelligence gathering. The courtesan identity was particularly valuable for obtaining information from high-ranking targets, but it required extraordinary skill to maintain convincingly. Ninja trained for such roles needed to master not just the arts of entertainment and seduction, but the sophisticated cultural knowledge, poetic sensibility, and social graces that distinguished genuine courtesans from mere prostitutes. They learned to play musical instruments at professional levels, to compose poetry that would impress educated audiences, to conduct themselves with the proper mixture of allure and dignity that made courtesans welcome in aristocratic circles. The psychological demands of maintaining false identities for extended periods were enormous, requiring mental discipline that few people could sustain. Ninja learned meditation techniques that helped them maintain their psychological balance while living as someone else. Methods for compartmentalizing their true personalities to prevent them from bleeding through their assumed roles, and strategies for managing the stress and isolation that came from being constantly surrounded by potential enemies who believed them to be friends or allies. Memory techniques became crucial for maintaining multiple identities over time, as a single inconsistency in personal history or behavioral patterns could expose an operative and compromise an entire operation. Ninja developed elaborate mental filing systems that allowed them to instantly access the appropriate memories, relationships, and knowledge base for whatever role they were playing. They practiced switching between identities so smoothly that the transitions became automatic, allowing them to respond appropriately even in unexpected situations. The creation of supporting documentation and physical evidence for false identities required collaboration between many specialists within the ninja community. Expert forgers created authentic-looking travel passes, commercial agreements, and personal letters that would support a cover story under official scrutiny. Craftsmen produced clothing, tools, and personal possessions that showed appropriate signs of age and use, while intelligence networks established false histories by placing agents in distant communities who could corroborate an operative's claimed background if investigators made inquiries. Long-term infiltrations represented the highest form of this art, with ninja sometimes spending years establishing themselves in target communities before beginning their actual intelligence work. They would arrive as genuine newcomers, gradually building relationships and establishing their credentials through consistent behavior and demonstrated competence. Over time, they would become valued members of their adopted communities, trusted with confidences and included in important decisions, all while maintaining their secret loyalties and missions. The integration of disguise techniques with other ninja skills created operatives of extraordinary versatility and effectiveness. A ninja posing as a traveling merchant could use their knowledge of regional dialects and customs to blend seamlessly into any community along their route, while their training in observation and memory allowed them to gather detailed intelligence about local conditions, military preparations, and political alignments. Their technical skills enabled them to conduct sabotage operations when necessary, while their martial abilities provided protection if their cover was compromised. The seasonal aspects of disguise work reflected the rhythms of medieval Japanese society, with different identities becoming more or less plausible, depending on the time of year. Traveling merchants were most credible during the spring and fall trading seasons, while agricultural workers fit naturally into summer harvest periods. Religious pilgrims could explain their presence almost anywhere during festival seasons, while craftsmen and laborers were most believable when major construction projects were underway. Weather conditions also influenced disguise choices, as heavy rain, snow, or fog could provide concealment for activities that would be suspicious in clear conditions, while also making certain types of travel and work more plausible. A ninja might use a sudden storm as cover for infiltrating a target facility, while posing as a traveler seeking shelter, or take advantage of seasonal flooding to approach a riverside castle while disguised as a ferryman or fisherman. The relationship between master and student in disguise training was particularly intimate, as instructors needed to observe and correct not just external behaviors, but subtle psychological patterns that might betray an assumed identity. Students learned to monitor their own unconscious habits and reactions, to identify and suppress personality quirks that might be recognized by enemies familiar with their true identities, and to develop new patterns of thought and behavior that would support their operational roles. Advanced practitioners developed the ability to maintain multiple identities simultaneously, appearing as different people to different audiences while keeping their various roles consistent and believable. A single operative might be known in one district as a successful merchant, in another as a devout monk, and in a third as a skilled artisan, traveling between these communities as their various personas had legitimate reasons to move from place to place. The ethical dimensions of living false lives created psychological challenges that ninja communities addressed through their philosophical training and support systems. Extended deception, even for legitimate purposes, could erode an individual's sense of authentic identity and moral center. Ninja learned to maintain their core values and loyalties while adapting their surface personalities to distinguish between necessary professional deception and personal dishonesty, and to find ways of serving truth through methods that required temporary falsehood. The most skilled masters of disguise were said to be able to fool even themselves, becoming so completely absorbed in their assumed identities that they genuinely experienced the emotions, desires, and concerns of their fictional personas. This level of transformation was both the highest achievement of the art and its greatest danger, as operatives who lost touch with their true selves might abandon their missions or transfer their loyalties to the communities they had been sent to infiltrate. The legacy of ninja disguise techniques extended far beyond military applications, influencing theatrical traditions, social customs, and even philosophical concepts about the nature of identity and reality. The idea that personality itself might be fluid and adaptable, that truth could be served through carefully constructed fiction, and that the most profound changes occurred not through force, but through patient, invisible influence. These concepts shaped Japanese culture in ways that are still visible today. As the medieval period drew toward its close and Japan moved toward political unification, the golden age of disguise artistry would face new challenges from more sophisticated security measures, improved communications, and changing social structures. But the masters who had perfected these techniques had already established principles and methods that would influence intelligence operations for centuries to come, proving that the most powerful weapons are often those that remain completely invisible until the moment they achieve their purpose. In the depths of mountain workshops, where forge fires cast dancing shadows against stone walls, and in hidden chambers, where the scent of herbs and chemicals mingled with the soft sounds of careful craftsmanship, the ninja developed an arsenal unlike anything seen in the conventional armies of medieval Japan. These were not the gleaming symbols of honor and status that marked samurai warfare, but subtle instruments designed for purposes that required silence, concealment, and devastating effectiveness in the hands of those who understood their true potential. The philosophy underlying ninja equipment was fundamentally different from that which guided traditional weapons and armor. While samurai gear emphasized durability, beauty, and the projection of power and status, ninja tools prioritized versatility, concealment, and to accomplish specific tasks with minimal risk of detection. A single ninja implement might serve multiple functions: a climbing tool that could become a weapon, a seemingly innocent household item that concealed lethal capabilities, or a device that could create opportunities for escape as well as attack. The most iconic of all ninja weapons, the shuriken or throwing blade, existed in dozens of variations, each designed for specific tactical situations. The star-shaped Hira shuriken that would later become famous in popular culture were actually among the least common forms, as their distinctive shape made them difficult to disguise, and their symmetrical design was less effective than specialized alternatives. More typical were the bow shuriken, straight-throwing spikes that could be disguised as hair ornaments, writing implements, or tools of various trades. The true value of shuriken lay not in their ability to kill, though they could certainly be lethal when properly employed, but in their versatility as tactical tools. They could be thrown to create noise distractions, to trigger mechanical traps from a safe distance, to cut ropes or other bindings, or to mark locations for later reference. When coated with various chemical compounds, they could deliver incapacitating drugs, temporary blindness, or other specialized effects that would disable targets without causing permanent harm. The kusarigama, a farming sickle attached to a weighted chain, represented the ninja genius for adapting ordinary tools to extraordinary purposes. In its agricultural guise, it was completely innocent, a common implement found in every farming community throughout Japan. But in trained hands, it became a weapon of remarkable versatility, capable of entangling enemy weapons, striking at unexpected angles, and providing advantages in combat situations where conventional swords would be ineffective. The chain component could be used independently for climbing, for binding prisoners, for creating tripwires or other obstacles, or for retrieving objects from dangerous locations. The weighted end served as a flexible mace that could strike around shields or other defenses, while the sickle blade could cut through rope, leather, or cloth with surgical precision. Masters of the kusarigama could use the weapon's unique properties to control the distance and timing of combat encounters, keeping opponents at the optimal range for their techniques, while preventing enemies from closing to more favorable positions. climbing equipment represented another area where ninja innovation produced tools of remarkable sophistication and effectiveness. The basic climbing claws, or tekage, were designed to look like ordinary farming implements when not in use, but could be strapped to hands and feet to provide secure grips on surfaces that appeared completely smooth. Made from specially treated steel that would not reflect light or create noise when striking stone or wood, these claws allowed ninja to scale castle walls, cliff faces, and building exteriors that defenders considered impossible to climb. The rope and grappling systems used by ninja were marvels of engineering that combined strength, lightness, and silence in ways that would not be matched by European equivalents for centuries. Silk ropes, incredibly strong for their weight, could be woven with patterns that provided secure handholds while remaining nearly invisible in dim light. Grappling hooks were designed with curved prongs that would catch securely on wooden beams or stone ledges without creating the metallic sounds that might alert guards to an intrusion. More sophisticated climbing systems included telescoping poles that could be assembled silently to bridge gaps or reach high openings, collapsible ladders that folded to the size of a bundle of bamboo poles, and even primitive pulley systems that allowed heavy equipment or unconscious persons to be raised or lowered without requiring superhuman strength from the operators. The development of specialized breathing apparatus represented one of the most remarkable technological achievements of the ninja communities. Recognizing that many of their most valuable targets would be protected by water barriers or could only be approached through aquatic routes, ninja craftsmen created devices that allowed extended underwater operations centuries before similar equipment appeared in other cultures. These underwater breathing systems ranged from simple hollow reeds that could be used for short-duration concealment in shallow water, to more complex arrangements involving leather bladders and bronze tubes that permitted swimming across substantial water barriers while remaining completely submerged. The most advanced systems incorporated multiple air chambers and valve arrangements that could sustain an operative underwater for periods that seemed impossible to contemporary observers. Chemical warfare represented another area where ninja innovation far exceeded anything available to conventional military forces. Working with knowledge derived from Chinese alchemical texts, Buddhist medical practices, and indigenous Japanese herbalism, ninja chemists developed an extensive pharmacopoeia of compounds designed for specific tactical applications. Smoke-producing mixtures could create instant concealment, with different formulations producing smoke of various colors, densities, and durations depending on tactical requirements. Some compounds created thick, choking clouds that would force defenders to abandon their posts, while others produced thin, persistent hazes that obscured visibility without creating obvious evidence of artificial interference. Flash powders and explosive compounds allowed ninja to create diversions, breach barriers, or eliminate specific targets with surgical precision. These early explosives were remarkably sophisticated, incorporating timing mechanisms, directional focusing techniques, and even primitive fragmentation effects that could be tailored to specific operational needs. The ninja understanding of chemistry extended to the creation of various acids and solvents that could weaken metal locks, dissolve rope bindings, or create structural weaknesses in wooden buildings. The study of poisons occupied a central place in ninja chemical knowledge, but their approach to toxic compounds was far more nuanced than simple assassination tools. Ninja pharmacologists developed substances that could cause temporary paralysis, induce deep sleep, create convincing symptoms of various diseases, or produce psychological effects like confusion, fear, or euphoria. Many of these compounds were designed to be undetectable by taste, smell, or appearance, allowing them to be administered through food, drink, or even contact with treated fabrics or other objects. Equally important were the antidotes and protective measures that allowed ninja operatives to employ dangerous compounds without risking their own safety. They developed techniques for building immunity to various poisons through gradual exposure, created protective salves and treatments that could prevent absorption of toxic materials through the skin, and maintained extensive knowledge of herbal remedies that could counteract the effects of both their own weapons and those that enemies might employ against them. The tools of surveillance and intelligence gathering were as carefully developed as the weapons of direct action. Ninja craftsmen created devices for listening through walls and doors, for observing activities from concealed positions, and for recording and transmitting information across great distances without detection. Some of these tools were remarkably sophisticated. Bronze tubes that could amplify distant sounds, mirrors and lenses arranged to provide views around corners or over obstacles, and even primitive periscope-like devices that allowed observation from completely concealed positions. Lock-picking tools represented another specialized craft, with ninja metalworkers creating picks, keys, and manipulation devices that could defeat the security systems of their era with remarkable efficiency. These tools were often disguised as everyday items, picks hidden in the handles of eating utensils, skeleton keys disguised as religious ornaments, or lock manipulation devices built into the frames of seemingly innocent hand mirrors or cosmetic containers. The psychological impact of specialized ninja equipment was often as important as its practical effectiveness. The mere knowledge that ninja possessed devices that could defeat conventional security measures, could strike silently from impossible distances, or could inflict harm through undetectable means, created an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty that multiplied the tactical advantages of relatively small numbers of operatives. Fire-starting equipment ranged from simple tinderboxes to complex incendiary devices that could be triggered by timing mechanisms, tripwires, or even changes in temperature or humidity. These tools allowed ninja to create diversions, destroy specific targets, or eliminate evidence of their operations, with different systems designed for different applications, some creating brief, intense fires that would quickly burn out, others producing slow, persistent blazes that could consume entire structures. Communication devices included various forms of signaling equipment, mirrors for reflecting sunlight across great distances, whistles and horns that could produce coded messages using natural sounds that would not alert enemies to artificial communication, and even primitive semaphore systems using flags, banners, or positioned objects that could transmit complex information to observers who understood the codes. The disguise and impersonation tools developed by ninja artificers were as sophisticated as any equipment designed for direct combat. They created cosmetics that could alter facial features in subtle but convincing ways, clothing and accessories that could transform appearance and suggest different social classes or occupations, and various prosthetics and padding that could change apparent body shape, age, or physical condition. Document forgery equipment allowed ninja to create authentic-looking official papers, commercial contracts, personal letters, and other written materials that would support cover identities or provide access to restricted areas and information. This required not just artistic skill, but detailed knowledge of papermaking, ink composition, seal carving, and the various writing styles and administrative procedures used by different organizations and government agencies. Timing devices and mechanical systems allowed ninja to conduct complex operations that required precise coordination or delayed effects. These ranged from simple water clocks and candle timers to more sophisticated clockwork mechanisms that could trigger various devices at predetermined intervals. Such tools were essential for operations that required multiple simultaneous actions or for creating alibis by ensuring that certain events occurred when the perpetrators were visibly elsewhere. The maintenance and concealment of specialized equipment presented constant challenges for ninja operatives who needed to keep their tools in perfect working condition while ensuring that they could not be identified as weapons or espionage equipment if discovered by enemies or neutral parties. This led to the development of various hiding techniques, hollow compartments in seemingly solid objects, tools that could be rapidly disassembled into innocent-looking components, and equipment that could be disguised as religious objects, trade goods, or personal possessions. The training required to use ninja equipment effectively was as demanding as the development of the tools themselves. Each device required its own specialized techniques, and the most effective operatives were those who understood not just how to employ individual tools, but how to combine different pieces of equipment to achieve complex tactical objectives. A single mission might require the coordinated use of climbing gear, chemical compounds, lock-picking tools, disguise materials, and communications devices, all employed with perfect timing and absolute silence. The seasonal considerations that governed the use of ninja equipment reflected both the practical limitations of medieval technology and the tactical opportunities created by Japan's distinct climatic patterns. Some chemicals and mechanical devices functioned differently in various weather conditions, while certain tools were more or less conspicuous depending on the season and social context in which they were employed. As the ninja tradition developed and evolved, the tools of the shadow warriors became increasingly sophisticated, incorporating innovations from across East Asia and eventually from European technology as well. But the fundamental principles that guided their development remained constant. The preference for versatility over specialization, for concealment over intimidation, and for effectiveness over aesthetic appeal. These principles would influence the development of intelligence and special operations equipment for centuries to come, establishing precedents that modern practitioners still follow in their own development of tools designed for the shadows. In the soft light of early morning, when cherry blossoms drifted like snow across the courtyards of great castles, and the first calls of temple bells echoed through mountain valleys, two very different types of warriors prepared for the day ahead. One knelt in formal meditation before his ancestral shrine, his katana placed reverently beside him, his mind focused on honor, duty, and the eternal principles that had guided his family for generations. The other moved silently through shadows that still clung to corners and doorways, his thoughts occupied with practical matters of timing, opportunity, and the 100 subtle details that would determine whether his mission succeeded or failed. These two figures, the samurai and the ninja, represented more than different approaches to warfare. They embodied fundamentally opposing philosophies about power, honor, loyalty, and the very nature of human existence. Yet their destinies were inextricably intertwined, bound together by the political necessities and military realities of medieval Japan in ways that would shape both traditions for centuries. The samurai emerged from the great social transformation that swept Japan during the Heian period, as the elegant court culture of Kyoto gradually gave way to a more militarized society, dominated by warrior clans. These mounted warriors initially served as provincial police and private armies for aristocratic families, but they evolved into a distinct social class with its own values, traditions, and legal privileges. By the time of the Kamakura shogunate, the samurai had become the dominant political force in Japan, ruling through a complex feudal system that placed military prowess and personal loyalty at the center of social organization. The code of Bushido that governed samurai behavior emphasized concepts that were almost diametrically opposed to ninja philosophy. Where Bushido demanded open confrontation, ninja practice favored stealth and misdirection. Where samurai culture prized reputation and public recognition of achievement, ninja effectiveness depended on anonymity and the absence of any evidence that might reveal their activities. Where Bushido insisted on loyalty unto death to one's lord, ninja organizations maintained more flexible allegiances that could adapt to changing circumstances. These philosophical differences reflected deeper disagreements about the nature of reality and the proper way to live. Samurai culture, heavily influenced by Zen Buddhism, emphasized the importance of accepting one's fate with dignity, of finding meaning through adherence to unchanging principles, and of achieving spiritual enlightenment through the disciplined practice of martial arts. The samurai ideal was to face death without fear, to value honor above life, and to find beauty in the temporary nature of all earthly things, symbolized by the brief blooming of cherry blossoms that became central to samurai aesthetics. Ninja philosophy, drawing more heavily from Taoist concepts of adaptation and change, emphasized the importance of surviving and succeeding regardless of circumstances. Rather than accepting fate, ninja training focused on learning to manipulate fate, to create opportunities where none had existed, and to find ways of achieving objectives that others might consider impossible. The ninja ideal was not the glorious death in battle that samurai culture celebrated, but the successful completion of missions that might require years of patient preparation and could never be publicly acknowledged. Despite these philosophical differences, the practical relationship between samurai and ninja was far more complex than simple opposition. Many daimyo employed ninja operatives while publicly maintaining the samurai code of honor, recognizing that survival in Japan's turbulent political environment required both conventional military strength and unconventional intelligence capabilities. Some samurai privately studied ninja techniques as supplements to their formal martial training, while many ninja came from samurai backgrounds and retained strong connections to the warrior class. The geographic distribution of ninja and samurai strongholds reflected their different roles in Japanese society. Samurai dominated the Great Plains and river valleys, where cavalry could operate effectively and where large-scale agricultural production could support the complex logistics of conventional armies. Ninja flourished in the mountainous regions and border areas where conventional forces were less effective and where the local population had strong incentives to develop unconventional defensive capabilities. The mountain provinces of Iga and Kōga, the legendary heartlands of ninja culture, occupied a unique position in this geographical relationship. These regions were close enough to the centers of samurai power to be strategically important, but sufficiently remote and difficult to conquer that they could maintain their independence and distinct culture. The ninja communities in these areas served as buffers and intermediaries between rival samurai factions, sometimes playing different sides against each other to maintain their own autonomy. The economic relationship between ninja and samurai was equally complex. Samurai society was based on rice agriculture and the extraction of surplus production from peasant farmers, creating a rigid economic hierarchy that supported the warrior class but limited social mobility for other groups. Ninja communities developed more diverse economic foundations, combining agriculture with crafts, trade, and various forms of service provision that made them less dependent on any single source of income. This economic flexibility gave ninja organizations certain advantages in adapting to changing conditions, but it also meant that they lacked the massive resources that great samurai clans could marshal for large-scale military operations. Ninja effectiveness depended on efficiency and precision rather than overwhelming force, on achieving strategic objectives through minimal expenditure of resources rather than through lavish displays of power. The technological relationship between the two warrior traditions reflected their different priorities and resources. Samurai military technology focused on battlefield effectiveness, with elaborate armor systems, sophisticated metallurgy for sword production, and impressive fortification techniques designed to withstand conventional siege warfare. The aesthetic dimension of samurai equipment was almost as important as its practical function, with weapons and armor serving as symbols of status and artistic achievement, as well as tools of war. Ninja technology emphasized concealment, versatility, and surprise effectiveness. Rather than perfecting single-purpose weapons and equipment, ninja craftsmen created tools that could serve multiple functions and could be disguised as innocent objects. Where samurai might carry a dozen different specialized weapons, a ninja operative might accomplish the same range of tactical objectives with 3 or 4 carefully designed implements that appeared to be ordinary traveling gear. The training methodologies of the two traditions were as different as their equipment and objectives. Samurai education combined martial arts instruction with literary and cultural studies designed to produce warrior gentlemen capable of serving in both military and administrative capacities. The curriculum included poetry, calligraphy, tea ceremony, and other refined accomplishments that would enable samurai to function effectively in court society as well as on the battlefield. Ninja training was intensively practical, focused on developing specific capabilities needed for intelligence and unconventional warfare operations. While ninja education did include cultural studies, these were oriented toward understanding and manipulating social systems rather than appreciating their aesthetic qualities. A ninja might study poetry in order to compose coded messages or to blend into literary circles, not to express personal emotions or philosophical insights. The role of women in the two traditions illustrated their different approaches to social organization and human potential. Samurai society was heavily patriarchal, with women expected to serve primarily as mothers of future warriors and as symbols of family honor. While some samurai women did receive martial training and occasionally participated in military operations, their roles were generally subordinate and their achievements were rarely celebrated in their own right. Ninja communities were much more egalitarian in their treatment of gender roles, recognizing that women could often accomplish intelligence objectives that would be impossible for male operatives. Kunoichi developed their own specialized techniques and equipment, and many achieved leadership positions within ninja organizations based on their demonstrated competence rather than their family connections or social status. The religious and philosophical dimensions of the ninja-samurai relationship reflected broader tensions within Japanese society about the proper relationship between individual achievement and social harmony, between practical effectiveness and aesthetic beauty, between adaptation to circumstances and adherence to principle. Buddhism influenced both traditions, but in different ways, encouraging samurai to accept suffering and death as natural parts of existence, while inspiring ninja to see through the illusions that limited human potential. The legendary encounters between ninja and samurai that pepper Japanese historical records and folklore typically emphasized the different strengths and weaknesses of the two approaches to warfare. Stories of ninja defeating famous samurai warriors through stealth and cunning served to illustrate the limitations of relying solely on conventional martial prowess, while accounts of samurai overcoming ninja plots through courage and determination demonstrated the power of unwavering principle and superior training. One of the most famous of these legendary encounters involved the great samurai general Uesugi Kenshin and the ninja of Iga province during the 16th century. Kenshin, renowned throughout Japan for his tactical brilliance and personal combat skills, found his conventional military advantages neutralized by ninja defenders who struck at his supply lines, spread false information among his troops, and conducted psychological warfare operations that eroded his army's morale and effectiveness. The ninja defenders didn't meet Kenshin's forces in open battle, where the samurai's superior numbers, equipment, and training would have given them overwhelming advantages. Instead, they attacked his vulnerable points, his communications, his intelligence gathering, his assumptions about enemy capabilities and intentions. They forced him to fight a type of war for which his training and philosophy had not prepared him, demonstrating that even the most skilled conventional warriors could be defeated by opponents who understood different rules of engagement. The political implications of the ninja-samurai relationship extended far beyond individual combat encounters or military campaigns. The existence of effective ninja organizations represented a challenge to the samurai monopoly on military power and their claims to social superiority based on martial prowess. If farmers, artisans, and other non-samurai could develop military capabilities that rivaled or exceeded those of the warrior class, what justifications remained for the rigid social hierarchy that placed samurai at the top of Japanese society? This challenge became increasingly significant as Japan moved toward political unification under leaders like Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu. These great unifiers needed to consolidate power by eliminating independent military forces that might threaten their authority. But they also recognized the value of ninja capabilities for their own strategic objectives. The result was a complex process of co-optation and suppression that gradually integrated useful ninja elements into the emerging national government, while eliminating those aspects of ninja culture that threatened political stability. The cultural legacy of the ninja-samurai relationship would influence Japanese society long after the medieval period ended, and both traditions lost their practical military significance. The tension between honor and effectiveness, between public reputation and private achievement, between rigid principle and flexible adaptation, became enduring themes in Japanese literature, theater, and popular culture. The philosophical questions raised by the comparison between ninja and samurai approaches to warfare and life remain relevant in contemporary discussions about ethics, leadership, and the proper balance between individual freedom and social responsibility. The ninja emphasis on adaptability and practical effectiveness appeals to modern sensibilities that value innovation and results, while the samurai commitment to honor and principle continues to inspire those who seek meaning through adherence to transcendent values. As we contemplate these two paths through the landscape of human possibility, we can appreciate both the elegant certainty of the samurai way and the creative flexibility of the ninja approach, recognizing that each responded to genuine needs and authentic insights about the human condition. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the world balanced between darkness and light, both the meditating samurai and the shadow-moving ninja sought their own forms of truth and their own ways of serving purposes greater than themselves. In the great halls of feudal castles, where silk banners displayed the mon of ancient clans and the scent of incense mingled with the ever-present awareness of mortality that shadowed medieval Japan, the daimyo faced decisions that would determine not only their own survival, but the fate of entire regions. These territorial lords, caught between the declining authority of the imperial court and the rising power of regional strongmen, found themselves in a world where traditional military approaches alone could no longer guarantee victory or even survival. It was in this context of escalating political complexity and military innovation that the most sophisticated leaders began to recognize the strategic value of the shadow warriors who moved like whispers through the margins of conventional warfare. The employment of ninja by the great daimyo represented more than simple military expediency. It reflected a fundamental evolution in how power was acquired, maintained, and projected in a rapidly changing world. The relationship between the territorial lords and the ninja communities was never simple or straightforward. Unlike the clear hierarchical bonds that connected samurai retainers to their masters, the arrangements between daimyo and ninja operatives were characterized by ambiguity, deniability, and the constant tension between the public face of honorable warfare and the private necessity of effective intelligence operations. Oda Nobunaga, perhaps the most innovative military commander of the Sengoku period, understood better than most of his contemporaries that victory would belong not to those who clung to traditional methods, but to those who could most effectively combine conventional and unconventional capabilities. His campaigns against the Iko-Iki religious leagues, his systematic destruction of Buddhist military strongholds, and his revolutionary use of firearms all demonstrated a willingness to employ whatever methods served his strategic objectives, regardless of their conformity to established precedent. Nobunaga's relationship with the ninja communities was particularly complex, involving both extensive employment of their services and ultimate destruction of their independent power. He recognized that the mountain strongholds of Iga and Kōga could either serve as valuable assets for his unification campaign or dangerous threats to his authority. There was no middle ground. His initial approach was to attempt co-optation, offering generous terms to ninja leaders who would place their organizations at his disposal while maintaining the fiction that their activities were independent of his direct control. The intelligence networks that Nobunaga developed with ninja assistance extended throughout central Japan, providing him with information about enemy troop movements, political developments, economic conditions, and the personal characteristics of rival commanders that proved invaluable in planning his campaigns. These networks operated on multiple levels, from high-level political intelligence gathered by operatives positioned within enemy courts to tactical reconnaissance conducted by agents who could move freely through hostile territory while maintaining perfect cover identities. The siege warfare that dominated much of the Sengoku period created numerous opportunities for ninja employment, as conventional military operations often stalled at the walls of well-fortified castles that could resist direct assault for months or even years. Ninja specialists could penetrate these defenses through means that were unavailable to regular troops, conducting sabotage operations that might open gates from within, eliminate key defenders, or create diversions that would enable conventional forces to achieve breakthrough. The famous siege of Osaka Castle during the early 17th century provides an excellent example of how ninja capabilities could be integrated with conventional military operations to achieve objectives that neither approach could accomplish alone. The castle's massive walls and sophisticated defensive systems had been designed to withstand any form of direct assault, but ninja operatives were able to infiltrate the fortress and provide intelligence about internal conditions, defensive preparations, and the morale of the defenders. More dramatically, ninja specialists conducted sabotage operations that weakened key defensive positions, eliminated crucial supplies, and spread confusion among the defenders at critical moments when conventional forces launched their coordinated attacks. These operations were planned and executed with such precision that the defenders often could not determine how their security had been breached or their preparations compromised. The psychological warfare capabilities that ninja brought to conventional military operations were often as valuable as their direct action capabilities. The mere knowledge that ninja operatives were active in a region could create an atmosphere of paranoia and mistrust that degraded enemy effectiveness even when no actual ninja operations were taking place. Rival commanders would waste valuable resources on security measures designed to counter ninja infiltration, limit their communications to prevent interception, and restrict the movement of their own personnel in ways that reduced operational flexibility. This psychological dimension was particularly important in the complex political environment of the Sengoku period, where the loyalty of subordinates and allies was always uncertain, and the defection of key supporters could transform military situations overnight. Ninja operatives could exploit these uncertainties by spreading carefully crafted rumors, delivering forged documents that appeared to reveal treacherous communications, or staging incidents that would cast suspicion on rival factions within enemy organizations. The economic intelligence that ninja networks provided to their daimyo employers was equally crucial in an era when warfare had become increasingly expensive and logistically complex. Understanding enemy financial resources, supply routes, and economic relationships could provide decisive advantages in campaigns that might last for years and consume enormous quantities of men, materials, and money. Ninja operatives positioned within merchant communities, financial institutions, and trade organizations could provide detailed assessments of enemy economic capabilities and vulnerabilities that would be impossible to obtain through conventional reconnaissance. The diplomatic intelligence gathered by ninja operatives was perhaps even more valuable than their military reconnaissance, as the shifting alliance systems that characterized the Sengoku period required constant monitoring of political developments, personal relationships, and secret negotiations that might dramatically alter the strategic landscape. A daimyo who knew in advance about planned alliance changes, marriage negotiations, or secret agreements could position his forces and adjust his policies to take advantage of these developments or to prevent them from threatening his interests. Takeda Shingen, the legendary Tiger of Kei, developed one of the most sophisticated intelligence systems of his era, employing ninja operatives not just for tactical reconnaissance, but for strategic intelligence gathering that extended throughout central and eastern Japan. His network included agents positioned within the retinues of rival daimyo, operatives who had established themselves as trusted merchants in key commercial centers, and specialists who could monitor and influence the political activities of religious institutions that maintained their own military forces. Shingen's intelligence system was so effective that he often knew about enemy troop movements, alliance negotiations, and strategic planning before his rivals had completed their own decision-making processes. This intelligence advantage allowed him to position his forces optimally, to exploit enemy weaknesses before they could be corrected, and to avoid strategic mistakes that might have resulted from incomplete or inaccurate information about enemy capabilities and intentions. The integration of ninja intelligence with conventional military planning reached its highest development under commanders like Shingen, who understood that information was itself a weapon that required careful targeting, precise timing, and skilled employment to achieve maximum effect. His staff included specialists who could analyze intelligence reports to identify patterns and opportunities that might not be obvious from individual pieces of information, and who could coordinate intelligence gathering with operational planning to ensure that reconnaissance efforts focused on the most strategically significant questions. The naval warfare that played an increasingly important role in Japanese conflicts as regional powers sought to control coastal areas and offshore islands created new opportunities for ninja employment, as their specialized skills in underwater operations, small boat handling, and amphibious infiltration were well suited to maritime environments. Ninja operatives could conduct reconnaissance of enemy harbors and coastal defenses, sabotage ships and port facilities, and support amphibious landing operations in ways that conventional naval forces could not match. The famous naval campaigns of the late Sengoku period, including the battles around the inland sea and the various attempts to establish control over strategic islands, frequently involved ninja operations that remained largely invisible to contemporary chroniclers, but were crucial to the ultimate outcomes. Ninja specialists could swim underwater to attach explosive devices to enemy ships, could infiltrate harbors to gather intelligence about naval preparations, and could establish hidden observation posts on strategic islands that would provide advance warning of enemy fleet movements. The technological innovations that transformed warfare during the Sengoku period, particularly the introduction of firearms and improved fortification techniques, created both new challenges and new opportunities for ninja employment. While improved defensive systems made traditional infiltration techniques more difficult, they also created new vulnerabilities that skilled operatives could exploit. The complex mechanical systems required to operate the large cannon and sophisticated locks needed to secure new fortifications provided entry points for sabotage operations that could disable entire defensive systems. The gunpowder weapons that were revolutionizing battlefield tactics also provided ninja with new tools for their specialized operations. Explosive devices could be used not just for demolition, but for creating diversions, signaling across great distances, or eliminating specific targets with precision that exceeded anything available through conventional weapons. The noise and confusion created by gunpowder weapons could provide cover for infiltration operations that would have been impossible in the quieter environment of traditional warfare. The logistics systems that supported the larger armies and longer campaigns of the later Sengoku period created new targets for ninja operations, as supply lines, communication networks, and administrative systems became increasingly complex and therefore increasingly vulnerable to disruption. A small ninja team conducting sabotage operations against enemy supply depots, transport routes, or communication facilities could achieve strategic effects far out of proportion to their numbers or resources. The administrative systems required to govern expanded territories and coordinate complex military operations also provided opportunities for ninja infiltration and intelligence gathering. Skilled operatives could position themselves within enemy bureaucracies, gaining access to official documents, policy discussions, and strategic planning that would provide invaluable intelligence about enemy capabilities and intentions. The increasing literacy and record-keeping that accompanied administrative sophistication created more opportunities for document forgery, code breaking, and information manipulation. Uesugi Kenshin, Takeda Shingen's great rival, developed different approaches to ninja employment that reflected both his personal philosophy and his strategic situation. Where Shingen emphasized comprehensive intelligence gathering and long-term strategic planning, Kenshin focused more on tactical intelligence and direct action operations that could provide immediate battlefield advantages. His ninja operatives specialized in rapid reconnaissance, sabotage operations that could be executed quickly during military campaigns, and psychological warfare techniques designed to demoralize enemy forces just before major engagements. The religious dimension of Kenshin's personal identity as a devoted Buddhist also influenced his approach to ninja employment, as he sought to minimize operations that involved deception, assassination, or other activities that might conflict with his spiritual commitments. This created interesting tactical constraints that required his ninja operatives to develop particularly sophisticated techniques for achieving strategic objectives through methods that, while unconventional, did not violate his ethical standards. The rivalry between Takeda and Uesugi forces created some of the most sophisticated intelligence operations of the medieval period, as each side's ninja operatives worked to penetrate the other's security measures while protecting their own secrets. These shadow conflicts often involved elaborate deception operations, double agents, and disinformation campaigns that continued even during periods when the two domains were not actively engaged in conventional warfare. The eventual rise of Tokugawa Ieyasu to supreme power represented both the culmination and the transformation of the relationship between daimyo and ninja operatives. Ieyasu had employed ninja extensively during his rise to power, particularly operatives from the Iga region, who provided crucial intelligence and tactical support during his campaigns. The Hattori family, in particular, developed such close relationships with the Tokugawa that they became hereditary retainers whose ninja background was transformed into legitimate samurai status. However, Ieyasu's success in unifying Japan under Tokugawa control also meant the end of the political conditions that had made ninja services so valuable to competing daimyo. Once political stability was established and the major sources of internal conflict were eliminated, the demand for intelligence operations declined dramatically, and the independent ninja communities found their traditional clients no longer required their services. The transformation of ninja from independent operators serving competing daimyo to specialized retainers of the unified Tokugawa government represented a fundamental change in their role and status. Where they had once sold their services to the highest bidder or the most strategically appropriate employer, they now became permanent employees of a single authority, with all the security and limitations that such employment entailed. The integration of selected ninja operatives into the Tokugawa administrative and security apparatus provided them with new opportunities, but also required them to abandon many of the practices and principles that had defined their traditional culture. They had to accept fixed hierarchical relationships, permanent assignments, and operational constraints that limited their traditional flexibility and independence. The daimyo who had once employed ninja operatives found themselves in similar transitions, as their new status as Tokugawa vassals eliminated both their need for independent intelligence capabilities and their authority to conduct the kinds of operations that had made ninja services valuable. The price of political stability and administrative efficiency was the elimination of the competitive environment that had driven innovation in unconventional warfare and intelligence operations. As we reflect on this transformation, we can appreciate both what was gained and what was lost in the evolution from the chaotic but creative environment of the Sengoku period to the peaceful but constrained world of Tokugawa administration. The lords of war had found ways to harness the shadow arts for their ambitious purposes, creating military capabilities that exceeded anything available to their predecessors. But the very success of their efforts ultimately eliminated the conditions that had made such innovations necessary. In the quiet gardens of Edo Castle, where the Tokugawa shoguns would rule for over 2 centuries, the memories of those turbulent times when ninja moved like ghosts through the landscape of ambition and conflict would gradually fade into legend. But the lessons learned about the relationship between conventional and unconventional power would influence Japanese strategic thinking for generations to come. In the hushed archives of temples and the private libraries of great families, where ancient scrolls rest wrapped in silk and the scent of sandalwood preserves secrets as old as memory itself, there lie chronicles of missions that shaped the destiny of Japan in ways that few could imagine. These are not the grand battles celebrated in war chronicles, or the heroic single combats that echo through samurai legends, but rather the whispered achievements of invisible operators whose success was measured not by glory gained, but by catastrophes prevented and opportunities created. The art of espionage, as practiced by the ninja communities, reached levels of sophistication that would not be matched again until the development of modern intelligence agencies centuries later. These operations combined technical skill, psychological insight, and strategic thinking in ways that transformed isolated pieces of information into powerful weapons capable of toppling governments and redirecting the course of history. One of the most remarkable espionage operations of the medieval period involved the infiltration of Oda Nobunaga's intelligence network by operatives working for the Takeda clan. The operation, which lasted for over 3 years, demonstrates the patience and long-term thinking that characterized the highest levels of ninja tradecraft. The mission began when Takeda agents identified a low-ranking clerk in Nobunaga's administrative system who had accumulated gambling debts that threatened his family's honor and financial security. Rather than approaching this individual directly with offers of money or threats of exposure, the Takeda operatives spent months studying his personal habits, family relationships, and psychological profile to determine the most effective method of recruitment. They discovered that the clerk's primary weakness wasn't greed, but pride. He resented his low status and lack of recognition despite his genuine competence and years of faithful service. The recruitment approach was masterful in its subtlety. Takeda agents arranged for the clerk to accidentally encounter a wealthy merchant who shared his interest in classical poetry and who seemed impressed by his literary knowledge and cultural refinement. Over a period of months, this merchant, actually a highly trained ninja operative, developed what appeared to be a genuine friendship with the clerk, providing him with the intellectual companionship and social recognition that he craved from his legitimate employment. Only after the relationship was firmly established did the merchant begin making casual requests for information that seemed innocent enough: general knowledge about administrative procedures, observations about the personalities of various officials, speculation about policy developments that any intelligent person might discuss with a trusted friend. The clerk, flattered by the attention and convinced of his friend's discretion, shared information freely without recognizing its strategic significance. The intelligence gathered through this relationship provided the Takeda leadership with detailed knowledge about Nobunaga's decision-making processes, his assessment of various military situations, his relationships with subordinate commanders, and his plans for future campaigns. This information proved invaluable in enabling the Takeda forces to anticipate Nobunaga's moves and position their own forces advantageously during several crucial military confrontations. The operation was so well constructed that the clerk never realized he had been manipulated, continuing to regard his merchant friend as a genuine companion even after circumstances eventually separated them. The Takeda operatives had achieved their intelligence objectives without creating any evidence that might compromise their source or alert Nobunaga's security apparatus to the penetration of his organization. Another legendary espionage operation involved the systematic infiltration of the religious community surrounding one of the major Buddhist temples that maintained its own military forces during the turbulent Sengoku period. The target was an intelligence network operated by the warrior monks, who had developed their own sophisticated information-gathering capabilities to support their political and military activities. The ninja operatives chosen for this mission spent over 2 years preparing for their roles, studying Buddhist theology, learning the specific rituals and practices of the target sect, and developing the spiritual insights and philosophical understanding that would allow them to function convincingly as genuine religious practitioners. They underwent actual religious training at allied temples, participated in meditation retreats and scholarly discussions, and acquired the mental discipline and behavioral patterns that would make their cover identities unshakable. When they finally infiltrated the target temple, they did so not as spies pretending to be monks, but as individuals who had genuinely mastered the religious practices and philosophical principles of their adopted faith. Their espionage activities were conducted with such perfect integration into their religious duties that even their closest associates within the temple community never suspected their true purpose. The intelligence gathered through this operation revealed the extent of coordination between various Buddhist military organizations, their relationships with secular political leaders, and their plans for resistance to the unification campaigns being conducted by various daimyo. This information proved crucial in enabling secular authorities to predict and counter religious military activities, ultimately contributing to the elimination of Buddhist military power that characterized the later medieval period. The technical aspects of ninja espionage operations were as impressive as their strategic sophistication. One famous mission involved penetrating a castle that was considered absolutely impregnable due to its location on a small island surrounded by swift-flowing water and its sophisticated defensive systems that included multiple walls, guard towers, and sophisticated alarm mechanisms. The ninja team assigned to this mission spent months studying the castle's routines, guard schedules, supply systems, and structural characteristics before attempting any form of penetration. They established observation posts on the mainland that allowed them to monitor activities within the castle using optical devices and enhanced auditory surveillance techniques. They studied the behavior patterns of the guards, the daily routines of the castle's inhabitants, and the seasonal variations in defensive preparations. Their approach to the castle was a masterwork of engineering and timing that involved underwater swimming across the surrounding river while using breathing devices that allowed them to remain completely submerged during their approach. They had calculated the precise timing needed to reach the castle walls during a brief window when guard patrols were at their most inattentive and when natural conditions provided maximum concealment. The climbing operation that followed required the use of specialized equipment that had been developed specifically for this mission, including climbing claws that would not create noise when contacting stone surfaces and ropes that were strong enough to support human weight while remaining virtually invisible in the dim light conditions under which the operation was conducted. Once inside the castle, the operatives conducted their intelligence gathering with such precision and care that they left no trace of their presence, despite spending several hours examining documents, observing defensive preparations, and gathering information about the castle's inhabitants and their activities. They photographed important documents using primitive but effective copying techniques, created detailed maps of the castle's interior layout, and identified key personnel whose activities would be crucial to understanding the strategic planning of the castle's defenders. Their exit from the castle was accomplished using a completely different route and method than their entry, demonstrating the redundancy and flexibility that characterized the highest levels of ninja operational planning. They had prepared multiple escape plans to accommodate various contingencies and had positioned equipment and supplies at strategic locations to support whatever exit strategy circumstances might require. The intelligence gathered during this operation provided their employers with detailed knowledge about enemy defensive capabilities, strategic planning, and personnel characteristics that proved invaluable in planning subsequent military operations. The information was so comprehensive and accurate that when conventional forces eventually attacked the castle, they were able to exploit specific vulnerabilities that had been identified during the ninja reconnaissance, achieving victory with minimal casualties and maximum efficiency. The psychological operations conducted by ninja intelligence services were often as important as their information-gathering activities. One particularly sophisticated campaign involved the systematic manipulation of enemy decision-making through the careful placement of false information, the creation of apparent intelligence sources that provided misleading data, and the exploitation of personality conflicts within enemy organizations to create confusion and misdirection. This operation began with detailed psychological profiles of key decision-makers within the target organization, identifying their cognitive biases, emotional vulnerabilities, and decision-making patterns that could be exploited to influence their choices. The ninja operatives developed strategies for presenting false information in ways that would seem credible to these specific individuals, taking advantage of their known preferences, fears, and assumptions to make disinformation appear authentic and actionable. The campaign unfolded over many months, with multiple false intelligence sources providing information that was individually credible but collectively misleading. The enemy leadership received reports that confirmed their existing beliefs and expectations, while gradually directing their attention toward threats that were either non-existent or far less significant than they appeared. Meanwhile, the real threats to their security were systematically concealed through carefully orchestrated deception operations. The culmination of this psychological campaign was the enemy's allocation of significant resources to counter threats that did not actually exist, leaving them vulnerable to the real attacks that came from completely unexpected directions. The operation succeeded not through direct confrontation, but through the manipulation of enemy perceptions and the exploitation of cognitive weaknesses that caused intelligent people to make strategically disastrous decisions based on apparently reliable information. The counterintelligence activities of ninja organizations were equally sophisticated, involving the detection and neutralization of enemy espionage operations while protecting their own secrets and operatives. These activities required the same skills and techniques used in offensive intelligence gathering, but applied defensively to identify threats, assess vulnerabilities, and implement protective measures. One famous counterintelligence operation involved the detection of a long-term enemy penetration of a major ninja organization and the subsequent conversion of the enemy agent into a double agent who provided false information to his original controllers while gathering valuable intelligence about enemy capabilities and intentions. The operation required extraordinary skill in managing the psychological pressures on the double agent, while maintaining the deception that convinced enemy intelligence services that their penetration remained undetected and productive. The establishment and maintenance of communication networks that could operate securely across great distances and hostile territory represented another remarkable achievement of ninja espionage capabilities. These networks involved the use of multiple relay points, coded messaging systems, and cover activities that provided legitimate reasons for the movement of personnel and information between widely separated locations. The security measures that protected these networks were remarkable for their sophistication and redundancy. Individual operatives knew only the minimum information necessary for their specific roles. Communication methods were varied to prevent pattern recognition, and multiple backup systems ensured that the compromise of any single element would not endanger the entire network. The legacy of these espionage operations extended far beyond their immediate tactical and strategic effects. They established principles of intelligence gathering, analysis, and operations that influenced Japanese strategic thinking for centuries and provided models for intelligence activities that would be studied and adapted by later practitioners of the intelligence arts. As we contemplate these achievements from the quiet perspective of historical distance, we can appreciate both their technical sophistication and their human cost. The operators who conducted these missions lived lives of constant danger and moral ambiguity, serving purposes that required them to sacrifice normal human relationships and accept risks that few people could endure. Their success was measured not by public recognition or personal achievement, but by their ability to remain invisible while shaping events that would determine the fate of millions. In the shadowed corners of history, where truth blends with legend and achievement, hides behind necessity, these masters of the invisible arts created legacies that would endure long after their names were forgotten, and their methods became mysteries to be puzzled over by future generations. The 16th century dawned upon Japan like a fever dream, bringing with it a period of upheaval so profound that it would be remembered as the Sengoku Jidai, the age of warring states, when the very foundations of Japanese society cracked and shifted like the earth during a great earthquake. In this time of endless conflict, when great daimyo rose and fell with the changing seasons and the map of Japan was redrawn with each passing campaign, the shadow warriors found themselves at the very center of historical transformation, their skills more crucial than ever before. This was an era when traditional certainties dissolved, when the ancient authority of the imperial court became little more than ceremonial, and when power flowed to those who could seize and hold it through whatever means proved effective. The rigid social hierarchies that had governed medieval Japan began to buckle under the pressure of constant warfare, creating opportunities for advancement that had been unthinkable in earlier, more stable times. It was an age that demanded adaptation, innovation, and the willingness to employ every possible advantage in the struggle for survival and supremacy. For the ninja communities nestled in their mountain strongholds of Iga and Kōga, the chaos of the Sengoku period represented both unprecedented opportunity and existential threat. The competing daimyo who carved up Japan among them desperately needed the intelligence gathering, infiltration, and sabotage capabilities that only the shadow warriors could provide. Yet the same forces that created this demand for ninja services also threatened to destroy the political independence that had allowed the ninja communities to maintain their unique culture and practices. The economic disruption caused by constant warfare created new social mobility and new forms of wealth that ninja operatives could exploit in their operations. Traditional trade routes were disrupted, creating opportunities for those who could navigate the dangerous paths between hostile territories. The breakdown of central authority meant that skilled individuals could rise rapidly in the service of ambitious lords, providing cover for ninja operatives to establish themselves in positions of influence within enemy organizations. The technological innovations that characterized the Sengoku period, particularly the introduction of firearms and the development of more sophisticated fortification techniques, created both challenges and opportunities for ninja operations. While improved defensive systems made traditional infiltration more difficult, they also created new vulnerabilities that clever operatives could exploit. The complex mechanical systems required to operate large cannons and the sophisticated locking mechanisms used to secure new types of fortifications provided entry points for sabotage operations that could disable entire defensive complexes. The psychological impact of constant warfare on Japanese society created an atmosphere of paranoia and uncertainty that ninja operatives could manipulate to their advantage. When no one could be certain of their neighbors' loyalties, and when political alliances shifted with bewildering frequency, the carefully placed rumor or the strategically revealed document could trigger consequences far out of proportion to the effort invested in creating them. Oda Nobunaga emerged from this chaotic landscape as perhaps the most revolutionary military commander of his era, and his relationship with the ninja communities exemplified both the opportunities and dangers that the Sengoku period created for the Shadow Warriors. Nobunaga recognized that victory would belong to those who could most effectively combine conventional military power with unconventional capabilities, and he employed ninja operatives on an unprecedented scale in his campaigns to unify central Japan. His siege of the Iko-Iki fortress temple of Ishiyama Honganji demonstrated the evolved role of ninja in Sengoku warfare. The temple complex, protected by fanatical warrior monks and situated in a nearly impregnable position surrounded by rivers and marshes, had resisted conventional military approaches for over a decade. Nobunaga's eventual success depended heavily on intelligence operations that revealed the temple's supply routes, internal disputes among the defenders, and the specific vulnerabilities of its defensive systems. Ninja operatives infiltrated the temple complex, posing as pilgrims, merchants, and even warrior monks, gathering detailed information about the fortress's strengths and weaknesses, while conducting sabotage operations that gradually weakened the defenders' capabilities. They poisoned food supplies, damaged weapons and equipment, spread disinformation that created confusion and mistrust among the defenders, and provided precise intelligence that allowed Nobunaga's conventional forces to focus their attacks on the most vulnerable points. The psychological warfare conducted by ninja operatives during this siege was equally important. They spread rumors about supernatural intervention on behalf of Nobunaga's forces, created false evidence of betrayal within the temple leadership, and conducted operations designed to demoralize the defenders and undermine their confidence in their ability to continue resistance. The eventual surrender of the fortress was as much a result of these psychological operations as of direct military pressure. The famous attack on Azuchi Castle, Nobunaga's revolutionary fortress that embodied his vision of unified Japan, demonstrated how ninja capabilities could be turned against their former employer. The operation, conducted by operatives working for Nobunaga's enemies, succeeded in penetrating the castle's sophisticated defenses and conducting sabotage operations that contributed to the internal conflicts that would eventually destroy Nobunaga's power base. The operatives responsible for this mission had spent years establishing their cover identities within the communities surrounding Azuchi Castle, positioning themselves as craftsmen, merchants, and servants whose presence would seem natural and whose activities would not attract suspicion. They created detailed maps of the castle's interior, identified key personnel and their vulnerabilities, and established communication networks that allowed them to coordinate their activities with external military forces. The climactic operation involved simultaneous attacks on multiple targets within the castle complex, using explosive devices to create diversions, while other operatives eliminated key defenders and opened gates to allow conventional forces to enter the fortress. The precision and coordination required for such an operation demonstrated the evolution of ninja capabilities from individual reconnaissance and assassination missions to complex multi-operator campaigns that could achieve strategic objectives previously considered impossible. The rivalry between Takeda Shingen and Uesugi Kenshin created some of the most sophisticated intelligence operations of the medieval period, as both commanders employed extensive ninja networks to gather information about their opponents' capabilities, intentions, and vulnerabilities. The shadow war between their respective intelligence services continued even during periods when their conventional forces were not actively engaged, creating a constant undercurrent of espionage and counter-espionage that influenced every aspect of their military and political planning. Takeda operatives established long-term positions within Uesugi territory, creating cover identities as merchants, craftsmen, and religious figures that allowed them to gather information about troop movements, supply conditions, and political developments that might affect military operations. These operatives maintained their positions for years, gradually building networks of sources and developing detailed knowledge about Uesugi capabilities and decision-making processes. The intelligence gathered by these networks enabled Takeda commanders to predict Uesugi military moves with remarkable accuracy, to position their forces advantageously for maximum strategic effect, and to exploit weaknesses in Uesugi defensive systems that would not have been apparent through conventional reconnaissance. The famous battles between these two great commanders were as much contests between their respective intelligence systems as between their conventional military forces. The naval dimensions of Sengoku warfare created new opportunities for ninja employment, as their specialized skills in underwater operations, small boat navigation, and amphibious infiltration were well suited to maritime environments. The competition for control of strategic islands, harbors, and coastal regions required intelligence capabilities that conventional naval forces could not provide. Ninja operatives could swim underwater to conduct reconnaissance of enemy harbors and coastal defenses, attach explosive devices to ships anchored in protected waters, and establish observation posts on strategic islands that would provide advance warning of enemy fleet movements. Their ability to operate effectively in aquatic environments gave commanders who employed them significant advantages in naval campaigns. The famous naval battle of Lepanto in the Mediterranean was occurring during the same period as Japanese naval conflicts, and while European naval warfare was developing in very different directions, The Japanese employment of specialized underwater operators and amphibious infiltration specialists represented innovations that were far ahead of contemporary European practices. The religious conflicts that characterized much of the Sengoku period created opportunities for ninja operatives to exploit the complex relationships between secular and religious authority. The warrior monks who controlled many temples and religious institutions maintained their own intelligence networks and military forces, creating multiple power centers that competing daimyo needed to monitor and influence. Ninja operatives infiltrated religious institutions not just to gather intelligence about their political activities, but to understand the theological and philosophical principles that motivated their resistance to secular authority. This understanding enabled daimyo like Nobunaga to develop more effective strategies for neutralizing religious military power, combining direct military pressure with psychological operations designed to undermine the spiritual foundations of religious resistance. The destruction of Enryakuji, the great Buddhist temple complex on Mount Hiei, exemplified this approach. The operation involved extensive preliminary intelligence gathering about the temple's defenses, the theological disputes within the Buddhist community, and the personal characteristics of religious leaders who might be influenced to reduce their resistance to secular authority. The systematic nature of Nobunaga's campaign against Buddhist military power demonstrated the evolution of warfare from sporadic raids and territorial disputes to comprehensive strategic campaigns designed to achieve fundamental political transformation. This evolution required intelligence capabilities that could support long-term planning and coordinate multiple simultaneous operations across wide geographical areas. The rise of Toyotomi Hideyoshi represented another transformation in the relationship between conventional and unconventional military capabilities. Hideyoshi, despite his humble origins, understood that success in the new political environment required the ability to project power through multiple channels simultaneously: conventional military force, economic manipulation, diplomatic negotiation, and covert operations. His unification campaigns in Kyushu and the subsequent preparation for the invasion of Korea demonstrated how ninja capabilities could be scaled up to support strategic objectives that extended beyond Japan itself. The intelligence networks established in Korea and China provided information about political conditions, military capabilities, and geographical features that would be crucial for planning large-scale military operations in unfamiliar territory. The tragic failure of Hideyoshi's Korean campaigns illustrated both the potential and limitations of extending Japanese ninja capabilities beyond their traditional operating environment. While the intelligence networks functioned effectively in gathering information about Korean and Chinese conditions, the cultural and linguistic barriers that ninja operatives encountered in foreign environments limited their ability to conduct the deep infiltration and long-term operations that had proved so effective within Japan. As the Sengoku period drew toward its close and Tokugawa Ieyasu emerged as the ultimate victor in the struggle for supreme power, the golden age of ninja independence was also coming to an end. The political stability that Tokugawa would impose on Japan would eliminate the competitive environment that had made ninja services so valuable to competing daimyo. while the administrative systems of the new unified government would gradually absorb those ninja capabilities that remained useful for maintaining internal security and preventing external threats. The great ninja strongholds of Iga and Kōga, which had navigated the turbulent waters of the Sengoku period with remarkable skill and success, would face their greatest challenge in adapting to a world where their traditional independence was no longer sustainable, and their survival would depend on their ability to transform themselves from autonomous operators into loyal retainers of the new unified state. In the quiet moments between battles, when the smoke cleared from burning castles and the cries of war gave way to the whispered conferences of survivors planning their next moves, the shadow warriors who had helped to shape this age of chaos could look back on achievements that had changed the course of Japanese history, while looking forward to a future that would test their adaptability in completely new ways. As the final decade of the 16th century unfolded, like a scroll bearing news of irrevocable change, the shadow warriors who had thrived in the chaotic currents of the Sengoku period found themselves facing a transformation as profound as any they had ever witnessed. The great wheel of history was turning toward an era of unprecedented peace and stability, and with it came the gradual eclipse of the conditions that had nurtured their unique culture for centuries. Tokugawa Ieyasu's victory at the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600 represented more than the triumph of one daimyo over his rivals. It marked the beginning of a systematic reorganization of Japanese society that would eliminate the political fragmentation, constant warfare, and competitive intelligence needs that had sustained the ninja communities through their golden age. The new shogun who would rule from Edo understood that lasting peace required not just military supremacy, but the careful management of information, the control of potential threats, and the integration of useful capabilities into a unified governmental system. For the ninja strongholds of Iga and Kōga, Tokugawa's rise to power presented both unprecedented opportunity and existential crisis. Their intelligence networks had provided valuable service to Tokugawa during his long struggle for supremacy, particularly during the critical campaigns that secured his control over central Japan. The Hattori family, in particular, had developed such close relationships with the Tokugawa organization that they had effectively become hereditary retainers whose ninja background was being transformed into legitimate samurai status. However, the same political unification that rewarded loyal ninja families with security and advancement also eliminated the market for their traditional services. When there was only one supreme authority in Japan, there was no longer any need for intelligence gathering about rival daimyo, no demand for infiltration operations against enemy strongholds, and no opportunity for the kind of independent contracting that had allowed ninja communities to maintain their autonomy while serving multiple clients. The administrative reforms that Tokugawa implemented to consolidate his control over Japan systematically eliminated the conditions that had allowed ninja communities to flourish. The Sankin Kotai system, which required daimyo to spend alternate years in residence at Edo, created a hostage system that made rebellion practically impossible while generating enormous amounts of intelligence about potential threats simply through the normal functioning of court life. The detailed population registers and travel control systems that the new government implemented made it increasingly difficult for operatives to maintain the false identities and freedom of movement that their work required. The social reforms that accompanied political unification were equally devastating to ninja traditions. The rigid class system that Tokugawa imposed classified every person in Japan into one of 4 categories: samurai, farmers, artisans, or merchants, with severe penalties for anyone who attempted to change their assigned status or function outside their designated role. This system eliminated the social mobility and fluid identities that had allowed ninja operatives to move freely between different social environments and maintain multiple cover identities simultaneously. The economic changes that followed unification further eroded the foundations of ninja culture. The new government's control over trade routes, currency systems, and commercial regulations eliminated many of the economic opportunities that ninja communities had used to support themselves while maintaining their independence. The standardization of weights, measures, and commercial practices made it more difficult for operatives to blend into merchant communities, while the increased governmental oversight of commercial activities created new risks for those attempting to use trade as cover for intelligence operations. The technological developments that characterized the early Tokugawa period also contributed to the declining relevance of traditional ninja capabilities. Improved communication systems, better record-keeping, and more sophisticated security measures made infiltration operations more difficult while reducing the demand for the kind of intelligence that ninja networks had traditionally provided. The development of more effective conventional military and police forces reduced the need for specialized capabilities in sabotage and unconventional warfare. Perhaps most significantly, the cultural transformation that accompanied political unification created an environment where the values and practices that had sustained ninja communities were increasingly seen as anachronistic or even subversive. The emphasis on social harmony, hierarchical order, and predictable behavior that characterized Tokugawa society was fundamentally incompatible with the flexibility, independence, and moral ambiguity that had defined ninja culture. The great ninja families responded to these challenges in different ways, with varying degrees of success in adapting to the new political environment. The Hattori clan, which had maintained the closest relationships with the Tokugawa organization, made the most successful transition to the new era. Under the leadership of Hattori Hanzo and his successors, they transformed themselves from independent ninja operators into hereditary retainers, responsible for the shogun's personal security and the management of certain sensitive governmental functions. This transformation was not without costs. The Hattori family's ninja background was gradually sublimated into more conventional samurai identity, with their specialized skills being reframed as particular forms of martial arts rather than as fundamentally different approaches to warfare and intelligence. The broader network of operatives and support personnel that had sustained their activities was either disbanded or absorbed into conventional governmental positions, where their unique capabilities could be employed within the constraints of the new administrative system. The Momochi family which had specialized in psychological warfare and disinformation operations, found it more difficult to adapt their capabilities to the new political environment. The demand for their particular skills declined dramatically as political stability reduced the opportunities for the kind of complex deception operations that had been their specialty. Some family members successfully transitioned to careers in conventional administration or military service, while others found employment in the entertainment industry, where their skills in creating convincing false identities and manipulating audience emotions could be applied in more socially acceptable ways. The Fujibayashi family, known for their technological innovations and tactical expertise, attempted to maintain their relevance by adapting their capabilities to the new security challenges of the unified state. They developed new methods for detecting and preventing internal threats, created improved systems for protecting governmental facilities and personnel, and contributed to the development of the intelligence apparatus that the Tokugawa government used to monitor potential sources of instability. However, even these successful adaptations came at the cost of fundamental changes to the character and culture of the ninja tradition. The independence, flexibility, and moral ambiguity that had defined ninja practice were gradually replaced by the loyalty, predictability, and moral certainty that the new governmental system demanded from its servants. The ninja families that survived the transition did so by becoming something fundamentally different from what they had been during their golden age. The broader ninja communities in Iga and Kōga faced even greater challenges in adapting to the new political environment. Without the high-level connections that had enabled the great families to transition into governmental service, many ninja operatives found themselves without employment or purpose in a world that no longer required their specialized skills. Some attempted to maintain their traditional practices by offering their services to merchants, religious institutions, or local authorities who still had occasional need for intelligence gathering or security services. Others sought to preserve their knowledge and techniques by establishing schools or training programs that reframed ninja skills as martial arts or practical crafts that could be pursued without the political implications of traditional ninja activities. These efforts had mixed success, as the governmental restrictions on weapons training and the social stigma associated with ninja practices made it difficult to attract students or maintain institutional continuity. The economic transformation of the regions that had once supported ninja communities was perhaps as significant as the political changes in determining their fate. The mountains of Iga and Kōga, which had provided strategic advantages during times of conflict, became economic liabilities during the peaceful Tokugawa period. The improved transportation networks and standardized commercial practices that facilitated trade throughout unified Japan bypassed these remote regions, leaving their inhabitants increasingly isolated from the economic opportunities that characterized the new era. Many former ninja operatives were forced to seek employment in conventional occupations for which their specialized training provided little advantage. Their skills in stealth, disguise, and unconventional warfare had limited application in a society that valued predictability, hierarchy, and adherence to established norms. Some found work as guards, messengers, or craftsmen, while others migrated to urban areas where their anonymity might provide some protection from the social stigma associated with their backgrounds. The cultural suppression of ninja traditions was both systematic and subtle, as the new government sought to eliminate practices that might threaten social stability without creating martyrs or driving potential subversives underground. Rather than engaging in dramatic persecution, the authorities simply made it increasingly difficult for ninja communities to function by enforcing regulations that restricted their traditional activities, limiting their economic opportunities, and discouraging the transmission of their knowledge to new generations. The philosophical and spiritual dimensions of ninja culture were particularly vulnerable to this gradual erosion. The Taoist and Buddhist concepts that had provided intellectual foundations for ninja practices were not explicitly banned, but they were increasingly displaced by Neo-Confucian ideologies that emphasized social harmony, hierarchical order, and moral certainty. The meditation practices, physical disciplines, and mental training techniques that had been integral to ninja education were reframed as forms of martial arts or religious practice that could be pursued within conventional social structures. The oral traditions that had preserved much of the specialized knowledge of ninja communities began to break down as older practitioners died without passing their wisdom to younger generations who lacked opportunities to apply such knowledge in practical situations. The songs, stories, and informal teaching methods that had transmitted complex technical information for centuries gradually lost their relevance as the social contexts that gave them meaning disappeared. Some efforts were made to preserve ninja knowledge in written form, but these initiatives faced significant obstacles. The literacy levels required to create comprehensive technical manuals exceeded those of many practitioners, while the political risks associated with possessing such documents discouraged their creation and circulation. The few written records that were created during this period were often incomplete, coded in ways that made them incomprehensible to later readers, or deliberately misleading to protect the authors from potential persecution. The international isolation that Japan maintained during much of the Tokugawa period further limited opportunities for ninja communities to adapt their capabilities to new challenges or markets. The Sakoku policy, which severely restricted foreign contact and travel, eliminated possibilities for employment in overseas operations or the adaptation of ninja techniques to international intelligence activities that might have provided alternative sources of purpose and income. The technological stagnation that characterized many aspects of Japanese society during the peaceful Tokugawa centuries also affected the development of ninja capabilities. The innovations in chemistry, engineering, and communications that had distinguished ninja communities during earlier periods required the stimulus of competitive pressure and practical necessity that peaceful conditions no longer provided. Without the demand for constant innovation and improvement, many of the technical advantages that had set ninja apart from conventional military forces gradually eroded. The social mobility that had allowed talented individuals from various backgrounds to join ninja communities and contribute to their development was severely restricted by the rigid class system of Tokugawa society. The meritocratic principles that had enabled ninja organizations to recruit and develop exceptional individuals, regardless of their social origins, became incompatible with a governmental system that assigned roles based on hereditary status rather than demonstrated ability. The regional autonomy that had protected ninja communities from external interference was systematically eliminated as the central government extended its administrative control throughout Japan. The local traditions, customs, and practices that had provided cover for ninja activities were standardized or suppressed in favor of uniform national practices that facilitated governmental oversight and control. The military reforms that accompanied political unification reduced demand for the kind of specialized military capabilities that ninja had traditionally provided. The professional military forces that served the unified state were trained in conventional tactics and equipped with standardized weapons that could be more easily controlled and directed than the improvised and unconventional approaches that had characterized ninja warfare. The intelligence functions that had been among the most important services provided by ninja communities were gradually absorbed into conventional governmental agencies that operated under direct official control. The informal networks and independent contractors that had characterized ninja intelligence operations were replaced by hierarchical organizations staffed by official personnel who lacked the flexibility and independence that had made ninja operatives so effective. As the 17th century progressed and the Tokugawa system became increasingly entrenched, the ninja communities that had once shaped the destiny of Japan found themselves relegated to the margins of history. Their skills, knowledge, and traditions survived in fragmentary form within certain families and institutions, but the social, political, and economic conditions that had sustained their unique culture were gone forever. The transformation was so complete that within a few generations, many Japanese had forgotten that ninja communities had ever existed as significant political and military forces. The shadow warriors who had once moved like ghosts through the landscape of Japanese history became themselves ghostly memories, preserved more in legend and folklore than in historical consciousness. Yet even as the practical relevance of ninja capabilities declined, their cultural significance began to evolve in new directions. The very qualities that made ninja traditions incompatible with Tokugawa society, their flexibility, independence, and moral ambiguity, made them increasingly attractive as symbols of resistance to authority and as representations of human potential that transcended conventional limitations. The stories and legends that began to cluster around ninja figures during this period of decline often bore little resemblance to the historical realities of ninja practice, but they served important psychological and cultural functions for a society that was becoming increasingly constrained by social and political restrictions. The mythical ninja who could leap over castle walls, become invisible at will, and defeat entire armies single-handedly represented fantasies of freedom and power that provided emotional outlets for frustrations that could not be expressed through conventional channels. In the quiet mountain villages where ninja traditions had once flourished, the descendants of shadow warriors maintained what fragments they could of their ancestral knowledge, waiting for times that might again call for their unique capabilities. They could not have foreseen that centuries later, when Japan would once again face external threats and internal transformations, their preserved wisdom would inspire new generations seeking to understand the relationship between individual capability and collective purpose, between tradition and adaptation, between the visible surface of events and the invisible forces that shape them. In the hushed corners of tea-houses, where travellers gathered to share tales of distant provinces, and in the candle-lit chambers where storytellers wove entertainment from fragments of memory and imagination, the figure of the ninja began its transformation from historical reality into something far more powerful and enduring, the stuff of legend itself. As the practical relevance of the shadow warriors faded with the establishment of Tokugawa peace, their cultural significance expanded in ways that would ultimately carry their influence far beyond anything they had achieved during their years of actual political and military importance. The process by which historical ninja became legendary figures was gradual and complex, shaped by the psychological needs of a society that was becoming increasingly constrained by social conventions and governmental control. The very qualities that had made ninja communities incompatible with the stable, hierarchical world of Tokugawa Japan, their independence, their flexibility, their ability to transcend conventional limitations, made them increasingly attractive as symbols of human potential and objects of imaginative fascination. The earliest literary treatments of ninja characters appeared in popular fiction of the early Edo period, where they served as convenient plot devices in stories that required characters capable of extraordinary feats and mysterious knowledge. These early fictional ninja bore some resemblance to their historical counterparts, displaying skills in stealth, disguise, and unconventional warfare that reflected genuine ninja capabilities. But they were already beginning to acquire abilities and characteristics that stretched beyond the bounds of historical possibility. The oral storytelling traditions that flourished in urban areas during the peaceful Tokugawa centuries provided particularly fertile ground for the development of ninja legends. Professional storytellers, seeking to capture and hold the attention of audiences hungry for excitement and adventure in an era of enforced tranquility, discovered that ninja characters could provide the perfect combination of familiar cultural references and exotic capabilities that made for compelling entertainment. These oral traditions had certain inherent tendencies that pushed ninja figures toward increasingly fantastic characterizations. The competitive environment of professional storytelling rewarded narrators who could present the most exciting and memorable versions of traditional tales, creating pressure for constant escalation and embellishment. Each retelling of a ninja story tended to make the characters more skillful, more mysterious, and more capable of impossible feats than previous versions. The geographical distance that separated most Japanese from the mountain regions where ninja had actually operated also contributed to the legendary development of ninja figures. For people living in the growing urban centers of Edo, Osaka, and Kyoto, the remote valleys of Iga and Kōga were almost as foreign and mysterious as distant countries, making it easy for storytellers to attribute any degree of exotic capability to characters who supposedly originated in these regions. The political constraints that limited discussion of recent history and contemporary events during the Tokugawa period encouraged the displacement of exciting narratives into increasingly distant historical periods or completely fictional contexts. Stories about ninja could provide outlets for fantasies about resistance to authority, individual agency, and the triumph of skill over institutional power that would have been dangerous or impossible to express through more realistic narratives. The religious and philosophical traditions that influenced popular culture during this period also shaped the development of ninja legends in important ways. Buddhism's emphasis on the illusory nature of material reality provided conceptual frameworks that could make seemingly impossible ninja abilities appear plausible, while Taoist concepts about the cultivation of extraordinary human potential offered explanations for why certain individuals might develop capabilities far beyond normal human limits. The artistic traditions that depicted ninja in visual media contributed significantly to the standardization and popularization of certain legendary characteristics. The practical constraints of theatrical performance, woodblock printing, and other artistic media encouraged the development of distinctive visual symbols and dramatic conventions that made ninja characters immediately recognizable while emphasizing their most fantastic attributes. The theatrical traditions of kabuki and bunraku provided particularly important venues for the development and dissemination of ninja legends. The spectacular stage effects that these performance forms required created pressure to present ninja characters as capable of increasingly dramatic feats. Supernatural speed, the ability to disappear and reappear instantaneously, the power to transform their physical appearance completely, and the skill to defeat entire armies single-handedly. The costume and makeup conventions that developed around ninja characters in theatrical performance established visual templates that would influence popular conceptions for centuries. The all-black clothing that became the standard ninja costume in theatrical productions was actually a stage convention designed to make performers invisible against black stage backdrops. But it became so strongly associated with ninja characters that audiences began to assume historical ninja had actually dressed that way. The literary development of ninja characters during the middle and late Tokugawa period reflected broader cultural trends toward romanticism, escapism, and the idealization of marginal figures who operated outside conventional social constraints. The ninja became a perfect vehicle for exploring themes about individual versus society, tradition versus innovation, and the tension between moral principle and practical effectiveness that were becoming increasingly relevant to Japanese society. The popular novels of authors like Takizawa Bakin and Jippensha Iku featured ninja characters who combined traditional Japanese values with exotic capabilities, creating heroes who could serve both as entertainment figures and as symbols of cultural identity during a period when Japan's isolation from the wider world was creating increasing anxiety about national strength and international competitiveness. The educational functions that popular literature served during this period also influenced the development of ninja legends. Stories about ninja characters often contained moral lessons about the importance of training, discipline, and dedication that reinforced social values while providing vicarious excitement through narratives about characters who transcended ordinary human limitations through extraordinary effort and commitment. The regional variations in ninja legends reflected the diverse cultural traditions and historical experiences of different areas of Japan. The mountain regions that had actually been home to historical ninja communities developed somewhat different legendary traditions than urban areas, with local stories often preserving more accurate information about actual ninja practices while still embellishing them with fantastic elements. The social functions that ninja legends served varied significantly across different segments of Japanese society. For the merchant classes who were prospering under Tokugawa commercial policies, but remained relegated to the bottom of the official social hierarchy, ninja characters represented fantasies about achieving power and influence through skill and cleverness rather than inherited status. For the samurai classes who were losing practical relevance as military specialists in an era of peace, ninja stories provided outlets for thinking about alternative forms of martial excellence that might remain meaningful in changed circumstances. The international influences that began to affect Japanese culture during the later Tokugawa period also contributed to the evolution of ninja legends. The increasing awareness of foreign military technologies, fighting techniques, and intelligence practices provided new reference points for imagining what enhanced human capabilities might look like, leading to ninja characters who combined traditional Japanese elements with exotic features derived from foreign sources. The technological changes that occurred during the late Tokugawa and early Meiji periods created new possibilities for the dissemination and standardization of ninja legends. The development of more efficient printing techniques, the expansion of literacy, and the growth of commercial publishing markets all contributed to the spread of ninja stories throughout Japanese society and their crystallization into relatively standardized forms. The historical consciousness that began to develop during the later Tokugawa period, partly in response to increasing foreign contact and the need to articulate distinctly Japanese cultural identities, led to new interest in preserving and understanding traditional practices that were disappearing under the pressure of social and economic change. This historical consciousness influenced the treatment of ninja legends, leading to efforts to distinguish between historical facts and fictional embellishments, while simultaneously preserving both as important elements of Japanese cultural heritage. The political changes that accompanied the Meiji Restoration created new contexts for interpreting ninja legends, as the traditional social hierarchies and governmental systems that had constrained ninja activities were swept away and replaced with new institutions that appeared to offer greater opportunities for individual advancement based on merit rather than inherited status. The military modernization that Japan undertook during the Meiji period created renewed interest in traditional Japanese military practices, including ninja techniques that might be relevant to contemporary intelligence and special operations requirements. This practical interest led to efforts to separate historical ninja capabilities from legendary embellishments, but it also contributed to the continued development of ninja legends by providing new audiences who were interested in the military applications of enhanced human capabilities. The cultural nationalism that characterized much of the Meiji period and beyond found ninja legends particularly useful as symbols of distinctly Japanese approaches to conflict, strategy, and human development that could serve as sources of national pride and cultural identity in an era of rapid westernization and international competition. The industrial and technological changes that transformed Japanese society during the modern period created new metaphorical possibilities for ninja legends, as the traditional emphasis on stealth, adaptability, and the transcendence of apparent limitations became increasingly relevant to navigating complex modern environments that required similar qualities for success. The international dissemination of Japanese culture that began during the modern period carried ninja legends far beyond their original cultural context, where they encountered new audiences and interpretive frameworks that would continue their evolution in directions that the original practitioners could never have imagined. As we reflect on this remarkable transformation from historical reality to legendary symbol, we can appreciate how the ninja legacy demonstrates the complex relationships between historical fact and cultural meaning, between individual capability and collective imagination, between practical skill and symbolic power. The shadow warriors who once moved silently through the political landscape of medieval Japan had become something even more elusive and powerful. Figures of imagination who could inspire, entertain, and challenge audiences across cultures and centuries. In the quiet moments between sleeping and waking, when consciousness hovers between the world of daily reality and the realm of dreams and possibilities, the legendary ninja continues to embody humanity's enduring fascination with the idea that individual dedication and training might enable us to transcend the limitations that seem to constrain ordinary existence, to move through the world with grace and purpose, and to achieve objectives that others consider impossible. As dawn breaks over the modern landscape of Japan, where ancient temples stand surrounded by gleaming skyscrapers and bullet trains whisper through valleys that once echoed with the footsteps of shadow warriors, the legacy of the ninja continues to cast its influence across the world in ways both obvious and subtle, permanent and ever-changing. The historical reality of these mountain-dwelling intelligence specialists has transformed into something far more enduring than their original practitioners could ever have imagined. A cultural phenomenon that speaks to fundamental human aspirations that transcend any particular time or place. The ninja of history were products of specific circumstances: the political fragmentation of medieval Japan, the geographic isolation of mountain communities, the constant warfare that created demand for unconventional military capabilities. Yet the principles they embodied and the skills they developed have proven to have relevance far beyond their original context, influencing fields as diverse as military science, business strategy, entertainment, personal development, and philosophical inquiry. In the realm of modern military and intelligence operations, the ninja legacy is perhaps most directly visible in the development of special forces units and intelligence agencies that employ many of the same principles that guided historical ninja communities. The emphasis on adaptability over rigid doctrine, the importance of cultural understanding and language skills for effective operations, the value of patience and long-term thinking in achieving strategic objectives. All of these concepts that were central to ninja practice have become standard elements of contemporary special operations and intelligence training. The unconventional warfare techniques that ninja developed for operating in hostile territory while maintaining cover identities have evolved into modern concepts of deep cover intelligence work, resistance operations, and what contemporary military theorists call gray zone conflicts that blur the boundaries between war and peace, between state and non-state actors. The ninja understanding that the most effective operations are often those that leave no evidence of having occurred at all has become a fundamental principle of modern covert action. The technological innovations that characterized ninja equipment design, the emphasis on multifunctional tools, the preference for simple mechanisms that could be maintained and repaired in the field, the importance of equipment that could be disguised as innocent objects, continue to influence the development of specialized military and intelligence equipment. Modern special operations units employ tools and weapons that would be instantly recognizable to historical ninja in terms of their design philosophy, even though the specific technologies involved have advanced far beyond what medieval craftsmen could have imagined. In the world of business and organizational strategy, ninja principles have found new application in concepts like competitive intelligence, strategic planning under uncertainty, and the management of organizational change. The ninja emphasis on gathering comprehensive information about competitors, understanding the psychological and cultural factors that influence decision-making, and maintaining operational flexibility in rapidly changing environments has proven remarkably relevant to contemporary business challenges. The lean startup methodology that has revolutionized technology entrepreneurship bears striking resemblances to traditional ninja approaches to mission planning and execution. Both emphasize rapid experimentation, learning from failure, adapting to changing conditions, and achieving maximum results with minimum resources. The ninja concept of using existing social and economic structures as cover for operations has evolved into modern ideas about creating business models that can function effectively within established markets while pursuing innovative objectives. The entertainment industry has perhaps done more than any other field to spread awareness of ninja culture around the world, though often in forms that bear little resemblance to historical reality. The ninja characters that populate movies, television shows, video games, and comic books typically display capabilities that are far beyond what any historical ninja could have achieved, but they serve important psychological and cultural functions that help explain their enduring popularity. These fictional ninja often represent idealized versions of human potential, individuals who have transcended ordinary limitations through training and dedication, who can navigate complex challenges with grace and effectiveness, who maintain their moral center while operating in morally ambiguous situations. In an increasingly complex world where traditional sources of authority and guidance seem inadequate to address contemporary challenges, the fictional ninja provides a model of individual agency and capability that appeals to people seeking greater control over their circumstances. The martial arts world has been deeply influenced by ninja traditions, though often in ways that emphasize the physical techniques while neglecting the intellectual, cultural, and strategic dimensions that were equally important to historical ninja practice. Modern ninjutsu schools attempt to preserve and teach traditional ninja skills, but they face the challenge of maintaining authenticity while adapting to contemporary legal, social, and practical constraints that make many traditional practices impossible or inadvisable. The legitimate martial arts traditions that derive from ninja practice emphasize many of the same principles that guided historical ninja training: the importance of adaptability over rigid technique, the value of understanding multiple martial arts systems rather than specializing in a single approach, the integration of physical training with mental and spiritual development. These traditions continue to attract students who are seeking more holistic approaches to martial arts training than those offered by more specialized fighting systems. The philosophical and spiritual dimensions of ninja culture have found expression in various personal development movements that emphasize the cultivation of extraordinary human capabilities through disciplined practice. While these modern interpretations often lack the cultural context and practical application that gave meaning to traditional ninja spiritual practices, they preserve important insights about human potential that remain relevant to contemporary seekers. The ninja emphasis on understanding the interconnectedness of all phenomena, the importance of maintaining mental clarity under pressure, and the possibility of transcending apparent limitations through patient practice has influenced various meditation traditions, mindfulness practices, and personal development methodologies that help people navigate the challenges of modern life. In the field of academic study, ninja history and culture have become subjects of serious, scholarly investigation that seeks to separate historical fact from legendary embellishment, while understanding both as important elements of Japanese cultural development. This scholarship has revealed the sophisticated nature of ninja organizational structures, training methodologies, and operational techniques, while placing them within broader contexts of Japanese social, political, and military history. The international academic interest in ninja studies has also contributed to better understanding of how cultural legends develop and spread, how specialized knowledge is preserved and transmitted across generations, and how historical practices can be adapted to serve contemporary needs while maintaining connection to their original purposes and meanings. The influence of ninja culture on contemporary Japanese society is complex and multifaceted, involving both pride in a unique cultural tradition and ambivalence about practices that seem inconsistent with modern values and social structures. Tourist destinations in the former ninja strongholds of Iga and Kōga attract visitors from around the world who are interested in experiencing something of traditional ninja culture, while museums and cultural centers work to preserve artifacts and knowledge that might otherwise be lost. The global spread of Japanese popular culture has carried ninja imagery and concepts to audiences far beyond Japan, where they have been reinterpreted and adapted to serve local needs and interests. The international fascination with ninja culture has created feedback effects that influence how ninja traditions are understood and presented within Japan itself, leading to interesting hybrid forms that combine historical elements with international expectations and interpretations. The technological revolution that has transformed human society over the past several decades has created new contexts for appreciating ninja principles and techniques. The information warfare capabilities that ninja developed for medieval political conflicts have evolved into contemporary concepts of cybersecurity, digital privacy, and information operations in online environments. The ninja understanding that information is itself a weapon that must be carefully gathered, analyzed, and deployed has become central to modern intelligence analysis, business strategy, and even personal success in information-rich environments. The traditional ninja skills of pattern recognition, source evaluation, and strategic thinking have proven remarkably adaptable to challenges involving big data analysis, social media intelligence, and digital investigation. The environmental awareness that was fundamental to ninja training, the ability to read natural signs, to move through terrain without leaving traces, to use natural phenomena to enhance operational effectiveness, has gained renewed relevance as humanity faces environmental challenges that require more sophisticated understanding of ecological systems and sustainable practices. The ninja principle of working with natural forces rather than against them, of finding ways to achieve objectives that minimize environmental impact, and of maintaining awareness of long-term consequences rather than focusing only on immediate results, offers valuable perspectives for addressing contemporary environmental and sustainability challenges. The social and political upheavals that characterize much of the contemporary world have created renewed interest in the ninja tradition of maintaining operational capability in unstable environments, adapting to rapidly changing conditions, and achieving strategic objectives despite limited resources and hostile opposition. The ninja model of decentralized organization, flexible leadership, and mission-focused cooperation provides alternative approaches to social organization that may be relevant to communities seeking greater resilience and autonomy. The global nature of contemporary challenges, from climate change to technological disruption to social inequality, requires types of thinking and action that transcends traditional boundaries and categories. The ninja tradition of crossing social, cultural, and political boundaries while maintaining coherent purpose and effective capability offers models for individuals and organizations seeking to address complex, multidimensional challenges that cannot be solved through conventional approaches. As we contemplate the enduring influence of these shadow warriors who emerged from the mist-shrouded mountains of medieval Japan, we can appreciate how their legacy demonstrates the power of human adaptability, the importance of comprehensive preparation, and the possibility of achieving extraordinary results through patient application of well-developed capabilities. The historical ninja faced challenges that required them to transcend conventional limitations, to develop capabilities that others considered impossible, and to maintain effectiveness in environments that would have defeated less adaptable individuals. Their success depended not on supernatural powers or magical abilities, but on systematic development of human potential, careful study of natural and social systems, and unwavering commitment to purposes larger than personal advancement. In our contemporary world, where individuals and communities face challenges that often seem overwhelming, and where traditional solutions appear inadequate, the ninja legacy offers both inspiration and practical guidance. The shadow warriors who once moved unseen through the political landscape of feudal Japan have become symbols of human potential that transcends apparent limitations, of the possibility of maintaining individual agency in complex systems, and of the power of dedication and training to create capabilities that can shape the world in positive ways. As twilight settles over the modern landscape and the last light fades from mountain peaks that once sheltered communities of extraordinary individuals, the eternal shadow of the ninja continues to move through human consciousness, reminding us that true power often works quietly and patiently, that the most profound changes often occur invisibly, and that the potential for transcendence lies within reach of anyone willing to undertake the necessary journey of development and service. In the space between sleeping and waking, between the possible and the impossible, between legend and reality, the spirit of the ninja endures as a testament to the remarkable things that human beings can achieve when they combine practical skill with philosophical wisdom, individual development with collective purpose, and ancient insights with contemporary challenges. The shadow may fade, but it never disappears entirely, waiting always for those who have eyes to see and hearts to understand the deeper truths that lie hidden beneath the surface of ordinary existence.